Hello, everybody. It's your old friends at Nerds of Roast, and welcome back to the Best of All Worlds podcast here with your friends Jonathan and the man to know, Commander Jerry Soul. Jerry, how are you doing tonight? You all good?
What did you just say?
Did you
Did you
not? Did
just
you not
call
get
me
that?
fucking commander?
Did you not get the motion though about the
No, no, no. You see, no, see,
about the no?
no. You see, if anything, right, you're obviously the boss. I get that. I put my hands up to that. But you would be commodore. You wouldn't be captain,
Oh,
Johnson. You'd be
stop it now! You're
commodore.
flattering
So
me.
I would be captain. So you can fuck off if you think I'm taking a demotion back down to commander.
I mean,
Absolutely
just
pissed off.
because I sit at a desk most of my time does not make me a commodore. Actually, no, fair enough. That's a very good point. Anyway, so Captain Jerry Soul, how are you doing tonight?
I'm very good. Very, very good.
Good, good. So, as you may have noticed, folks, from the title, this is our 20th episode of the Best of All World podcast. I know I'm shocked as well that we got to 20 episodes without killing each other, but here we are. We seem to be two very agreeable gentlemen. But as a tradition with every 10th episode we do on the show, we are doing a double header. And again, with most of the episodes we have, we are small of a choice. But we are going to go for something that was thematically consistent with our last episode, namely the Battle of Wolf 359. And switching from next gen to DS9 here, we are going to watch the pilot, indeed the first episode of Deep Space Nine, called Emissary, the debut of the man, the myth, the legend, the pimp slapper himself, Benjamin Sisko. Jerry, I would say that we're all very excited for this. Am I right in judging the room like that?
I'll put it this way, okay? I know we've watched a couple of Deep Space Nine episodes before, but for me, it's the pinnacle of it, because this is the episode that starts off, in my opinion, the best Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine. It's the very first episode. You see so many new and different things. This is not your typical on a starship traveling through the galaxy. This is a stationary space station. It's a space station that is not exactly in good shape. It's been left in absolute tatters by the people who decided to leave, the good old Cardassians.
Yeah.
Or the Kardashians, whatever you want to call them. It's a thing where this is a very gritty show, and you see that from the outset. It's very, very gritty compared to the lovely polishedness of Next Gen. It's very, very gritty. It's dirty. It's dark. There are certain things that people do in this show that you would have never seen in the Next Generation. For the simple fact is, this is a frontier assignment for people. And none more so than the likes of Bashir, who is coming in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and you learn very quickly it's not all it's cracked up to be. And then you've got somebody like as hard as Sisko, and even Chief O'Brien. He's seen things in his career. He's had a lavish time on the Enterprise, but now he's coming here. He's bringing his family along. They aren't too happy about it. There's a lot of things. Of course, we get lots of new species. Not that we haven't heard of them before, but we get lots of new species. We get probably one of the best characters, and I'll say characters and comedic characters all in one.
Yeah.
In this very first episode, and this character is one of the funniest in all of Star Trek, and that's of course Quark.
Yeah.
No doubt. We don't really necessarily see the funny side of Quark in this episode, but he really comes to his own by the end of this series, or the end of the first season, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair comment. Yeah.
This sets up the most exciting bit of Star Trek for me, which is this season, Deep Space Nine, this series. It is without a doubt, in my opinion, the best Star Trek show. It's extremely close to the top with the likes of the Next Generation and the original series. But for me, it pips at the post because Sisko is so good.
Yeah,
so good.
And like I said, that kind of gritty edge to it, I think, helped out a lot more in that sense. Again, learning from the Next Generation and everything that came in front of it, this is what Star Trek kind of needed a little bit in that sense. But even at the time, you would have thinking like people would have had kind of turned their nose up a little bit at DS9 for not being true Star Trek. But little we know, that was certainly not the case. But we could sit here and praise Sisko and his men till the cows come home, but unfortunately that does not watch the episode. So Jerry, are you ready to jump in and get started on this double header?
I'm ready.
So like I said, guys, if you are new to this show, we are going to watch the episode outright, all in one big block, because again, this is the double header. So if you're watching on a streaming platform of your choice, you can press play when we do and watch along with us and get our instant reaction commentary on the episode. If not, you can also watch then towards the end where we are going to give our reviews. We're going to do a few little segments in between as well, and then we're going to review the episode to see if it ranks among the highest we've watched so far, because that's a gimmick. It's best of all worlds. Literally watch along and then review, because that's kind of the point. But nevertheless, then we are going to kick off here. So Jerry, if you're ready, we shall get started.
I'm ready.
All right then. On 3, 2, 1, engage. And you know it's serious because we're starting off with rolling text.
Yeah.
Which is very
rolling
good,
text and then the ominous music in the background, buddy.
Yes.
Don't forget that. It's mad how the very first thing you see is him.
Yeah.
Very first thing you see.
But very key sequence there, in a sense where like you're immediately framing Picard and Sisko as enemies.
Yeah.
You know, which is a very good use of that. And of course, as well, key thing there is action right off the bat.
Yeah.
Again, I'll never understand why people just put rocks into starships. It just doesn't work.
I've never understood it.
No,
I've never understood
it. Makes
it.
no sense at all.
But obviously they needed to show that stuff was blown up and whatnot. But why rocks?
I don't know.
Like, it's not just rocks; it's rocks and gravel that they have in them.
Maybe that's how like sustainable building ended up being in the 24th century. So like, well, look, we know that steel kind of costs a lot economically, so we're just gonna make like make do with concrete and plaster and hope for the best. Hope that no one notices. It's a very small thing as well, but like obviously they're working on really small sets here. So the fact that they have the camera so narrow really kind of helps out with that. It just gets everything in a sort of a panic that you want.
And then it goes back to that whole grittiness.
Yes.
Obviously, this ship has had been blown up. A couple of minutes ago, it was in pristine condition. And it just sets it off for the entire show now. This is what this show is going to be. It's gritty. It's not going to be nice and polished like everything else. Now, I just noticed something there, okay?
Yeah.
The ship outside that just got blown up was an old Bird class.
Yes.
That has fuck all weaponry.
Yeah.
Why would you send that to fight the Borg?
Because Starfleet were going
Makes no sense.
In a bit of a panic, I would say.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Like the difference. That's what I find so funny. The difference between this battle, Wolf 359, and then the second battle of Wolf 359 in First Contact is it's like night and day.
Yes.
In how different it is, because all you have to do is look at that battle. Every single starship that was sent to battle, the Borg and that one, was essentially a warship. Essentially there to fight the Borg. And they knocked the bejesus out of them. Whereas all the ships in here, even before the Enterprise got there, it was like 30 or 40% of its outer hull was damaged.
Yeah.
So they had, the ships were doing, if they hadn't had, the plan to go back in time, without the Enterprise, they may have just blown up that ship. It would have taken longer. A lot more ships and a lot more people would have died. But it's fantastic. The difference between now and then, And
the remarkable thing is, the person to thank is that guy right there, is Sisko.
He was the one that pretty much created the entire Borg fleet, anti-Borg.
He designs the entire lot practically. Like he designs the Defiant. He certainly had his fingerprints over the likes of the Akira class and Steamroller and the Nova as well. So
and like the Saber as well.
The Saber, thank you. That's the one I was thinking. I always keep forgetting the Saber.
A lot of people do.
They do, yeah. There's another key thing as well to say is, what a visual!
Yeah,
what a visual!
I find interesting though, right? Is that we've talked about Star Trek and them getting things the right size.
Mm.
When you look at the Enterprise compared to the Borg cube, the Enterprise are quite small compared to the Borg
Yeah.
cube, whereas the Saratoga there, in conjunction with the Borg cube, was fucking huge.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't seem to get continuity right with regard to sizes and stuff like that. And it's especially prominent in Deep Space Nine
Yes.
because the first ship you see beside Deep Space Nine is the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Galaxy class starship, one of the biggest ships, if not the biggest ship in Starfleet.
Yeah.
Whereas later on down the line, the Enterprise looks kind of small next to the Enterprise.
Mm.
Whereas down the line, you'll see a Galore in a couple of seasons that's docked with Deep Space Nine. And it looks like it's only half the size of Deep Space Nine. Whereas we know Galaxy class starships are bigger than Galore class. So it's the old continuity is a bit all over the place
A
when it
little
comes
bit,
to
yeah.
Star Trek. But you don't mind it too much.
It's also trying to be a bit sneaky between like because it's one like school of thought between the physical models and there's another school of thought then between when they switch to the kind of computer generated stuff as well. And the CGI still kind of betrayed a little bit, especially I noticed the difference in say Enterprise, where like what was the episode where they outright fucked up the continuity with a Klingon ship or something? It was like a D5. It was like a D. There was like a D5 cruiser when they're no when it's like 100 years before that's made. It was like, what the fuck is that doing there? And there's like very minor things like that, but it shows you like sometimes they try and like sneak that underneath the or sweep it under the carpet a little bit.
Like
And
I generally don't mind stuff like that. It doesn't bother me that much. When it really started to bother me was in Discovery, when they started changing
yes,
everything. I understood that the showrunner Alex Kurtzman, he wanted to create his own feel for it, and I get that. You know what I mean? You only have to look
yeah,
at the newer Star Trek movies to see. People, J.J. Abrams, we wanted to change it up, but I definitely think J.J. Abrams got more of a Star Trek feel to it than Alex Kurtzman did, especially in that first season. He completely changed the Klingons. Obviously, they explained that in the next season.
yes,
There was no need for it. Absolutely no need for it. The Klingon ships, I'm not really always that critical when it comes to stuff like that because I don't mind people changing stuff, but they out and out completely changed the Klingon ships to the point where they had to come back into season 2. And the only Klingon ships that you saw in season 2 were, the D7s. We need to give them the D7s, give them all the D7s. It's stuff like that. Then you look at Picard. We got some new ships in Picard, but then all of a sudden we have the copy and paste fleet.
yes.
It made no sense. I'm like, what are you doing, Kurtzman? Come on, listen to the fans. The fans want.
And this is where I will give the showrunners credit in the sense where I don't think Kurtzman actually does listen to the fans to a certain extent. I think he has his own notion of where to go with some of the shows. I think once he's executive producer, it's grand, because he lets other people underneath him more, shall we say, hands on with Star Trek. Let's say. Do that kind of work, and that's shown more in the later stuff like the Picard's season 2 and season 3 coming soon, and with Strange New Worlds where they've got that stuff locked down. So it kind of shows their arse a little bit in certain aspects. But exactly. you are right in what you're saying. Like it's a lot of it sounds basic if you're talking to the right people. If you're talking to say Michael Okuda or you're talking to Doug Drexler, these lads know what they're talking about. Exactly. Like I would listen to them. They've been doing this for fucking years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now here we go. Right, the very first shot you see is the Enterprise attached to Deep Space Nine, and then all you see is the place in fucking shambles.
Yeah.
And there he is, the most important man in Starfleet.
Jesus! Look at the fucking kip I've been left with. That's it. Why is this place cleaned up? Because all of it is fucked. Inside and outside, Commander, yeah?
What I find very interesting about Sisko, he did a show before Deep Space Nine. That he was I think he was a badass cop or something like that.
That's right, yes.
He had the goatee and the head shaved. That's what he had. And he wanted to bring that to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And
the answer is Hawk, by the way. He was Hawk on Spencer.
And he wanted to replicate that here. And the executives in whoever was Paramount at the time, wherever it may be, said, "Oh no, no, you can't do that. No, no, no.
Yeah.
We need to make you better than that."
Mm.
Excuse me. So the fact when it came to season 4, he finally got the look.
Mm.
He turned from being, you know, he was kind of badass for the first 3 seasons, especially the fact that he hit Q. But as soon as he shaved his head and got that goatee, he was badass Sisko.
Yeah,
Ain't nobody
it's like
messes.
he evolved or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ain't nobody messes. He did. He was like Pokemon evolution.
Yeah.
He became went from Cisco to badass Cisco.
It's a start of fucking war with the Maquis, Cisco. That's the difference. Like
Don't
season
mind
one,
him, he
Cisco.
started the war with the Dominion, you mad bastard.
Yeah, yeah. I said that's the difference. Like season one, Cisco would have been passive aggressive towards the Maquis. Season four, Cisco would have nuked the bastards.
Yeah, he did.
And that's what you call character progression, folks.
Yep, he did.
Oh god. But I can see also why they like it's a very kind of cynical way of the our producers, but they also wanted to kind of make this Cisco character very paternal. Because again, the key difference is, at least at this early stage of the character, we need to make him 100% the opposite of Picard for the contrast, for the conflict. Now, early production notes, I don't know like whether this was supposed to be a recurring theme for the season or this is just this launching point for the season for this episode. But I think it works in this episode because you are clearly framing him as the main character. You want to establish him as a direct antagonist for Picard, which makes it very interesting. And then that's the start of his arc for the double header. And I think that's a good way of doing it. And also, like, since when have you ever seen like two main characters clash in a sense? Like, this is the first time we would have had a crossover episode like this, funny enough.
Yeah.
Much to that point. But even like when you see other characters like that, they're really in conflict because in Starfleet everyone's polite, unless they're an evil admiral. And even then, they're actually quite polite about being an evil. And your hair looks terrible. I'm Benjamin Sisko, and you need a haircut.
I love how they actually did try to replicate this hair in season 6. But then for every other season after season 1 or episode 1, she had the short hair.
That's right, yeah. Of course, at this point as well, like the Kira character is essentially a renamed Rolaren.
Yeah.
So even even the way she kind of carries on in this episode makes complete sense because she's still the same type of character, and it's only really towards the second half of the season where it actually starts becoming its own, let's say. Sometimes you can actually tell how livid Sisko is from the blinking.
Yeah.
Like,
his facial expressions are fantastic.
Yeah. He's very good. Avery is very good at just that kind of little bit of a tweak. The kind of ways it's like, I'm hiding my anger politely. This is Nog before he was Nog.
At this point, Avery Brooks would have been the absolute veteran on the set. And I love the fact that they speak so fondly of him. But he would help them and he would coach them. And he would be hard with them. It's like, no, you're not doing that right. You need to do it this way. But it was never in the sense that you're an idiot. You're completely wrong. It's like, you're doing it this way. Try it this way.
You know, you'd also throw Rene Auberjonois on that as well, in a sense, because he was a veteran actor for a long time too, and very different role for him to play because he's quite wooden.
Yeah.
especially in this first episode. But as we learn from like the likes of Data, sometimes having the wooden character is the best launch off point because you
Mhm.
add the humanity on top of them each time.
Yeah.
Unless you're Robert Picardo and you're a banter straight out the box.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm a doctor, not a vacuum cleaner. Didn't quite get his makeup right in this pilot, did they? Odo. They
I
smooth
think
him
you
out a
were.
lot in the second episode.
I think everyone kind of changed after the first episode. Look
Yeah.
at Kira's hair. You look at Quark's face and teeth.
Yes. Yeah.
But
He's
you can see,
very. It's very hardened or something like that, isn't it?
yeah, the nose is different in Quark after the first episode. The teeth are
Mm.
different. Um, everyone kind of had a little bit of a change. Obviously, the pilot is the pilot.
Yes.
They definitely. You see, you look at Odo there. Odo was very humanoid, rather
Mm.
than shapeshifter. Like
Yes. Very true.
you can see the wrinkles. You can see the hair. The ears. The whole lot. It's still very much a work in progress. We
Mm.
changed so much over the course of 7 years. Like,
Yeah, like there's internal logic to say, like obviously he still could be based himself more Bajoran than human at that stage,
yeah,
and then as time goes by, he blends in, if you pardon the pun, properly, with everybody. So,
yeah. Well, here we go.
here's the main event.
Yeah, literally, literally.
Here comes the fucking heavyweight clash, lads. Get your popcorn out.
What I find interesting is how it actually goes.
Mm. Still waiting on the LHD remake of DS9, aren't we?
I don't think we're going to get it.
No, somehow.
The old green screen was terrible there.
Yes. This is
Like at
small
that,
things
just
like that.
the facial expression is like fuck.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Immediately struggling for conversation here.
Yeah.
And just as Tony says as well, you can clearly tell he blames Picard for that. Like,
Yeah. But now Picard hardens.
yes, and Picard doesn't give a shit because he's not. Well, he does give a shit in a sense, but the energy is so tense here that he can't back out of it.
Mm. And Picard is like, forget about it.
Yeah,
At that point, he lost the argument. The argument was over.
yeah.
There was nothing more he could say or do.
There,
There
like
was no
nothing
way
was
he
going
was getting.
to.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was no way he was going to get through to him. No
no.
way.
I like a quick change into the Starfleet overalls here as well.
Mhm.
I imagine they must have been a lot more comfortable than the old the one pieces or the two piece in this by this time. Shut the fuck up. I'm Benjamin Sisko and I support my local businesses, especially the very sleazy casinos the Frankie run. You're a lying prick for one. Granted, it is probably because you stole all the money, but that's a separate issue. Apparently, Frankies are
The
vulnerable
eyes.
to. It
When he went, think about it, I'm like, fucking hell.
was like, I am actually. How's that? How's that possible?
And that's instantly like, this is now the banter you're going to have between Odo and
Yeah,
Quark. Absolutely love it.
it already sets up the dynamic of like the Tom and Jerry dynamic of them.
Yeah.
Everyone else is busy repairing the prim. Suppose Starfleet officers aren't used to it.
I'm wearing my overalls. There, I carried one piece. Are you happy?
God, that was so heavy.
Did you not hear it make a noise, Jerry? It made a noise. Again, another good framing device for the episode in the sense where there's like we've seen a bit of Bajor already from the next generation, and this is pretty much as the next generation left it for DS9 to basically take it back and go with it. So this is what's happening beyond that point.
If she could call for you with this, figures about that she could try to get to her, but she lives in seclusion. Rarely sees anyone.
Commander, it's time for the plot to advance. Come with me.
And now, even this point,
Mm,
and Kira's like, what's that all about?
yeah,
She's not quite as angry as she was. But she's
yeah.
looking down, what the hell is that all about? Why is he going with the Vedic? What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, there's something weird going on here. Like,
Why is he so important?
mm. Again, a nice key thing there is it's actually showing Bajor and Rubble in
Yeah.
ruins because it still is at that point.
Well, if you actually, it's mirrored between the very first episode of Deep Space Nine and the very last episode of Deep Space Nine, because you look at the ruins that the Cardassians left
Yes.
um, of Bajor, and the same thing happens to them in the very last episode.
Very true. Very, very true. A full circle moment, if you will.
Yeah.
Every time they do that, I'm kind of expecting like a playing card to come out from the back of it. It's like, see, my God, that was my card.
Obviously, she'll always be Kayopaka, but I'll always remember her as the woman who tried to rob the shopping basket from Rachel, our friends.
Fair. In fairness, given the choice, I'd rather her than fucking Nurse Ratchet. So it's a lesser of two evils, Jerry. To be fair.
Nurse, you're talking about Kai Wynn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only realized that recently when she actually died recently.
Mm.
I only realized exactly who she was. I'm like,
You forget about it. That's the thing. Like I'm realizing the role is too very similar as well. Like there's a lot of crossover there between the two.
but not only is she just like the nurse,
Mm.
she's Oscar winning.
Yeah.
Like there's not that many Oscar winning actors in Star Trek.
No.
And she was so good. And she even said it in her acceptance speech. She has made a career out of getting people to hate her.
Yeah.
And my
Which is
God, did she
fabulous.
do it so well in this show?
Mm.
But she's probably because everybody, even though like Gul Dukat was evil, you didn't hate him,
Yes.
but you fucking hated her.
Yeah. But at least Caldecott doesn't gaslight you. Like you know where the cat stands. Like he's it's like getting like angry at a fucking MAGA head. It's like, look, I know you're an idiot. I can't like I can't give you the lobotomy. I just have to trust that you'll get one by yourself.
Yeah. Now we will have to say one thing: the
Mm.
transfer of that scene there, from being beside her to on the beach, was seamless.
Yes, it
So
was.
for the
Yeah.
mid-90s for it to be that good, that was exceptional.
Mm. Again, a very key thing there of this time in Star Trek. You're actually able to do live shots in locations as opposed to on sets with brightly colored skies. Like he's had a lot of process there in that minute. So especially ones that went ow just like 2 minutes ago. Hey, just play it cool, man. Play it cool.
One thing I will say about the scene, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, it's not nothing that we haven't seen before in terms of women's clothing, right?
yeah.
But his clothing is quite revealing, in fairness.
The fucking state. I can't. I know what you're talking about.
Your eyes just get drawn like, holy shit.
Yeah, I know. But what was also that was like the other guy in the background. The poor fucker had to wear wrestling singlets to the beach like that. That poor fucker. Oh man, fucking singlet straight out of fucking main stage wrestling. That was Jesus Christ.
No, that was from CBW.
Yeah, fair. Aubergine Sue has to be euphemism there, right? I mean, he's wearing purple, like.
But Everett, like he said this many times throughout the 7 seasons. And I'm like, I really want to try aubergine stew.
There you go. But if it's Cisco's, it's something different.
Yeah.
Like I can totally understand his feeling there. 'Cause that's like waking up with a dream at the most pivotal point.
Hmm?
Our brains are dickheads for doing that, isn't it? Like it's just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck, man?
Mm.
This will help you. I can't invite my people until I know what.
Just give me the box.
So this is the thing. Obviously, she is the spiritual leader
Mm,
of Beja. Okay,
yeah.
but she made a very telling statement there. She said, "I need to know that the prophets have been warned," which means
Hmm.
the prophets have never spoken to her. She is essentially the Pope,
Yeah.
and she's
Saying a
telling
good way of
that
putting
she's
it,
saying
yeah.
that God hasn't spoken to her. Now, poor Kai Wynn, she said the prophets have never spoken to me. So, what really is the big difference between the two in terms of their belief and spirituality and stuff like that? So, if the prophets have never gone to Kaya Pocket, they never went to Kai
Mm,
Wynn. What's the difference? One is evil as fuck
yes.
and only wants power for herself, and the other is all good.
I suppose that's the difference, really, isn't it?
Mm.
In that you have it's a level of spirituality where like Wynn clearly is using her position as a political sway as opposed to anything else. Whereas you'd say Opaka is actively a religious leader. It is essentially, if you will, from very first principles, taking it from like someone who was the Dalai Lama,
Yeah,
essentially a not very non-political, very moral ethical stance to, let's say, an old Renaissance Pope, where
yeah,
like for one of their purposes they were the president of the area. So it's that kind of thing where you're getting power but from a different source,
yeah.
and ultimately the profits didn't really matter in that sense. It was purely the position that was important.
Like even even look at what Kai Wynn, or she would have been Vedic Wynn at the time, wouldn't she?
Yes, she was a Vedic Queen. Yeah.
She was trying to gain power. So
Mm,
she basically helped a military commander, a military general, not a politician, try to gain
yes.
power as well by creating a coup and a possible civil war.
Yeah.
And she did that just so she could gain power, which is
But
crazy. Like,
but then again, that's actually not that like that ludicrous when you think about it, because like I said, like in certain times of like fucking Christianity, the Pope did exactly that. It was like,
well, look at the
you know,
Borgias. Look what the Borgias did.
exactly.
You
Yeah,
know, and
exactly.
it
Like I
and it
said,
was
it's
all
not
in
too
the name of
ridiculous.
and all in the name of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I'm an atheist.
Join the club. The club of atheists. God isn't real. Anything else? No, no. I'm good. Grant.
Well, I loved Ricky Gervais's explanation as somebody who believes in God and somebody who doesn't. So
Mm,
there's 3,000 gods in the world,
yeah.
and if you're a Catholic, you believe in one, and you don't believe in 2,999. Whereas he's an
Mm,
atheist, and he believes in only one more or less, or
yes.
one less God than you. You
Mm,
know,
that's true.
it's,
It's a good way. It's a very good way of looking at it. Yeah.
yeah.
that was trill for it. Never speak to me again.
Mhm.
I love as well. Like this is already establishing the dynamic as well, and it completely mixes any kind of romance between the two of them,
Yeah.
because that would be a very easy thing for the writers to do. It's like no, it's that'd be awful.
Yeah. Well, it was you could see from the offset they wanted to have the sexual tension between Bashir and Dax. You
Dax,
know what I
yeah.
mean? It never happened. Well, it did, and it didn't. You know.
Yes. And here's Julian Bashir, the man that Paul Stamets wish he was.
Bingo.
Like legit, like Alex Kurtzman tried to write Julian Bashir and ended up with Paul Stamets. That's the best way I can position it.
And they're nothing alike.
They're yeah.
Because I love Bashir. I fucking hate Stamets.
Yeah. He's like there's like times like that where that kind of puts me off Discovery in a sense. Is the characters are just so fucking unlikable.
They really are. Like you only have
Yeah.
to look at Burnham. And
Mm,
every 5 minutes she's fucking crying.
I know, yeah. I know.
Like
The only
you only
actually one
go on.
the only one I actually do like is Saru. Like genuinely, like he's like proper, like he's the
Because
actual
Saru is badass. That's why.
yeah. That's the thing. Like, but they've actually put effort into his character.
Mm.
You know, it's I think it's a risky run sometimes of making a Star Trek series based oriented around one person because then everyone else doesn't get a fair share. You know.
Yeah.
But that's again the lesson they learned that they then applied in Star Trek in Strange New Worlds, where everyone gets a bit of time and attention.
Yeah.
And you know what? It fucking works.
Who knew? Episodic, and everyone is likable.
Ah. Now, of course, the eagle-eyed people in the room will notice that the first time you saw a Trill in Star Trek, they had a weird fucking backspace on their foreheads. But because they essentially signed Terry Farrell and didn't want to put a massive fucking like punctuation on her face, they gave her the leopard spots instead. And as retcons go, that was a very, very good call.
Yes, because I will go out on the limb here and say that Terry Farrell. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me here, and people will say, "No, it's got to be 7 of 9, or it's got to be whoever else." But I believe Terry Farrell, Jadzia Dax, is the best looking woman in all of Star Trek.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Because you know why? Because they never didn't have to try and sexualize her that much.
No.
In the same way that with 7 and 9, obviously ratings being an issue, they had to put her in fucking silver catsuit to make her look like fucking Catwoman. Like that was completely unnecessary with Jadzia because the character was just overwhelmingly pleasant, kind of ways. Like you didn't need to sugar her up in any sense.
Yeah.
And the gas thing is, like, sometimes they actually do it as a joke. I mean, we only recently watched Trials and Tribulations where they put her in the old school uniform. They did that as a joke because at that stage it's tongue in cheek.
Yeah. Like there was only a couple of occasions where like that they did try to sexualize it, but it's very, very few. There was the time on Ryza where she's wearing a kind of skimpy outfit. There's that time with Kira, and they dressed up and made Marion and stuff and all that. Excuse me. And then of course
I love this scene here. This is the most Irish thing I've ever seen in Star Trek.
He tried to do an Irish goodbye.
Yeah, I was about to say it's literally an Irish goodbye. It's
they're dirty bastard.
I'm so happy that has existed to the 24th century.
This is the thing, right? Chief O'Brien's rank has changed
I see it now.
so many goddamn times. There, he's essentially an ensign. Okay. Then he's in another few episodes of Next Generation. He's a lieutenant.
Yeah,
he's lieutenant junior grade, but he's a lieutenant. And then all of a sudden, when he goes there, he's a chief petty officer.
I'll play devil's advocate here, right? Because he's transferred over. I know there's a bit of continuity about the collar now, but in this moment in time, is he just wearing the bog standard uniform on the Enterprise because his post is now at DS9? He's now the petty officer, maintenance officer now at DS9. So while he's on board the Enterprise and still being stationed there for the time being, he's just wearing that as a sort of a placeholder. But that's kind of like covering over what is a very kind of like obvious retcon, essentially.
It is a great moment.
Yeah,
because essentially O'Brien has been there from the very beginning on the Enterprise for Picard,
indeed he has.
and
Yeah.
he could always rely on him. That's why
Mm.
he's the most important guy in Starfleet. You know,
Yep.
fair enough. You've got Geordi there as a fantastic engineer, but ain't nobody better than O'Brien.
No.
And Picard is essentially losing something here. You know, he's losing one of his best officers, so he had to go and say goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. It is that kind of thing. It's like real life as well. If you lose somebody from your office who you know is like 100% reliable, you're going like, as they're leaving, you go, "Fuck, I'm gonna miss him," because he was either constantly there or knew his shit and whatever it was, and whoever's gonna come in is gonna be inferior unintentionally, almost. Like you're just
Yeah.
not gonna. The dynamics gonna be so different. It's just like it's not going to be the same.
Mm.
Like I can guarantee you, I know the joke with like Transporter Room 3 was your favorite, wasn't it? It's like, for a fact Picard has never used Transporter Room 3 since. Like that's it. Like
It's kind of like a footballer when he leaves a club and they leave his
they retired a
number.
number. Yeah.
They retired that transporter room. Absolutely.
Transporter Room is now a swimming pool. It's where citation ops now is, where all the dumb. Yeah, that's where O'Brien used to be, yeah.
Now, this episode does so many things. Introduce you to so many characters, different ships, settings, actors, the whole lot. But not only does it give you one of the best series ever, or one of the best captains ever, it essentially, and again, people are going to argue about this, that's fine. It essentially introduces you to the best Star Trek villain ever. Because he is. He is so good. It beggars belief. He's fantastic.
I think the difference, I think that what makes him so great as well is that he's not a fleeting villain.
No.
Do you think where he might show up in like 1 or 2 episodes? Because I think you may have mentioned like a few episodes earlier that Kai Wynn, as much as we gave a fuck about her, only appears in about 13 episodes of DS9. She feels that she's there all the time, but she actually isn't. She's just there in very important points or very important episodes. Yeah. Whereas this motherfucker shows up every second week, and he doesn't even have that much. He just goes, "Well, I'm just here being sinister and creepy. Look at my long neck. Hi, I'm Galta Cat. How are you?" It's like, you're up to something. There's a reason you're here. Get out. Get the fuck. And also a very key thing as well, if you recall from the first time we saw the Cardassians was in the episode The Wounded, very underrated episodes, by the way, featuring Mr. O'Brien in that as well. They got quite a redesign from that, considering they were wearing essentially jock straps on their heads.
Yes,
at that point.
They had the basic Cardassian look in the head. The uniform, it kind of kept the kind of shape, but the look was very different. And then that stupid, as you say, jockstrap on their heads, and it had Mark Alamo in it as well.
Indeed, he was he played a different Gull. So
obviously, he did such a good job as that Gull. They were like, "No, we need this guy back here because he's something special here."
When you think about it, like this is gonna sound like a very kind of meta thing in a sense, but like DS9 was almost kind of an apology or a revision of some of the races they've done already. So like Dax obviously is the Trill that we kind of had in the Next Generation already, and said like, no, look, we have this general idea of the Trill being this kind of very hedonistic kind of race.
Yeah.
So let's improve that by going for the leopard spot and getting someone very, very attractive to play the role, because then that gets over the race. Then likewise, we need to fix essentially the Ferengi and get rid of this ridiculous fucking Jewish stereotype that was kind of intended, let's be honest, with the Ferengi character.
It was very much intended, but they became the most lovable characters throughout the whole of DS9 because of Quark. And he was absolutely.
But it was also that it wasn't just about Quark. It was the 3 people they had in to play the Ferengis. It was Armin Zimmerman, who was, I think, the big driving force about fixing how the Ferengis were presented. Because bear in mind, he was the first Ferengi. He was the first to see in The Last Outpost. So he wanted the character to change. By the way, Morn, best Easter egg in Star Trek. We'll get back to him in a minute. But like you have him, you also have Max Grozenik, who ended up being Rom. So you have a completely different character then as a Ferengi, and then of course you get Aaron Eisenberg then as Nog. 3 completely different characters as Ferengis, very different personalities, and that is what I love because you didn't the Ferengis were no longer typecasted as like shysters, Shylocks essentially, for want of a better word.
Like even going as far as to change the Bajorans.
Yeah.
When the very first, I think the very first Bajoran we meet is Rolar.
Yes.
Am I right about that? So even look at the nose and how
The
it's
nose
done,
ridge, yeah.
and then the decorative earring. It's one of the very first things that's brought up in the episode called Rolar.
That's right, yeah.
Because obviously she's a troublemaker in Starfleet, fair enough.
Mm.
But then Riker's like, you can't wear that. It's not part of the uniform. You know, this is the Enterprise. You're gonna put up or shut up type of fucking thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow. So they did change them ever so slightly. Obviously, Kira was meant to be the Laren of this show.
Yes.
You know, that's fine. But they definitely changed them to the look was slightly different. I think a lot of characters that you see, as you said, in the next generation, they use in Deep Space Nine as a way to say, listen, we need to change this. We fucked up here. Let's change them a bit. They change the Ferengi, change the Kardashians, change the Bajorans. I think even the Klingons get slightly changed in not their look, obviously, but
no,
how
I actually
we
will agree
see
with you
them.
on that. Yeah, the Klingons, their presentation changes a lot more in this.
How we see them, because even though there's a lot of Klingon episodes in the Next Generation, all those episodes, the Klingons were just simply the Klingons.
Yes.
Whereas you learn so much more about them in this show. Anything from, the blood debt to obviously Worf coming in and stuff like that, and learning more about his brother, learning more about Gowron and Martok. It's, the knowledge that you have about the Klingons before Deep Space Nine and after Deep Space Nine is very different.
Yes.
Very, very different.
But that's also very much based on the fact that like this became more of a political drama than the Next Generation did, where like you dip in and out of the kind of what's happening in the Empire in Next Generation, and again it was predominantly if you're in Worf's arc, whereas in this, like, because you were gearing up towards a major conflict, you had to throw in to see, well, what's happening with the Klingons, what's happening with the Romulans, and by doing that, you're giving yourself plenty of rope to write stuff about the Klingon Empire.
Yeah,
because like I said, it's perfectly reasonable that they start out as one thing in Next Generation and end like this in Deep Space Nine, because it's continuity, like it's progression, like things change, cultural shifts happen. It makes complete sense for that. Not the same, Chief, is it? That is the most Irish solution to anything. It's just like fixed. That is literally the Star Trek equivalent of banging the TV to get the picture to get back working.
Yeah. It's obviously the very first time you see a runabout.
Yes.
You would have very, very standard shuttlecraft that you would have seen. Like the first 2-3 seasons of Next Generation, you saw that really horrible looking shuttlecraft. Then you got the standard shuttlecraft that was after that you would have seen in this, in Next Generation, and in the first few seasons of Voyager until they upgraded them.
That's right, yeah.
So this wasn't just a shuttle. The shuttle was very basic.
Yeah.
It was just something to get you from A to B, whereas this is a miniature starship.
Yeah, it's a mini cruiser, I suppose, if you want to call it that. It's something that is like capable of defending itself if necessary, and it's more nimble than the traditional space shuttle.
It has quarters on it.
Yeah,
it has for people for not so much quarters, but it's like one big kind of dorm. We might as well call it that.
Yeah.
It had everything that was needed for a long voyage or scientific discoveries or whatever. I love the look of the inside of the wormhole, how it's basically essentially wet.
Yeah, it feels like it's like an undersea current, is the way I kind of always felt it.
There was a star just
70,000 light years from Dayton. I'd say we just found our way into a world.
Also, we're stranded.
Now that's very telling there because he essentially says 70,000 light years away. Now
Yes.
the entire Gamma Quadrant is not 70,000 light years away.
No, it's not.
You
That's
know,
saying there are closer points.
yeah. It's like part of the Federation is in both the Alpha and Beta quadrants.
Yes.
You know, so it's the thing. The Beta quadrant is not 70,000 light years away.
No.
You know,
That's it's only the
stuff
farthest
like that.
point of the Gamma Quadrant.
Stuff like that's a bit silly. You know,
Yes.
but you know, you get over it. They're at this point, they were still trying to learn. They were still learning. You know,
Yeah.
so I get that. It's fine.
And of course, you still like, especially when like Sisko says something like, "It might take us like 1,000 years to find this." It's like that's clearly him exaggerating as opposed to being actual like factual about that. No one's going to make those maths as quick in his head there. I always want like a blue screen to come up whenever that happens. It's like bloom. Wormhole that EXE has crashed. I have to forget how busy this episode actually is. It goes through a rapid fucking pace, like.
Yeah, so much goes on.
Yeah. You know already there's some weird shit going on here.
One of the most idyllic settings you've ever seen.
You're standing on a rock. You see the storm.
it's clearly they went there for environment that captured the moods of both characters. Happy-go-lucky Dax and depressed Sisko.
Look at my pattern. It's probing us.
Someone's idea of shaking hands, maybe. I am Commander Benjamin Sisko. The United Federation of Planets.
Eats. Cheese seems to be turned into an hourglass, which is a shame.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that also looks pretty bad. Not gonna lie. Is that first episode and Sisko's dead? It's not a shame.
And in fairness, it does make it look like what you would perceive to be the afterlife.
Yes.
You know, the white light.
Mm. Perhaps the human interpretation of the afterlife, if you will.
There's something inside. Some kind of light. That know it. Have you seen that know everything?
Yeah. Huh. I love the synchronized staring from the actress there. Everyone just goes. I am always a big fan of these sequences here, where they talk through different people.
Mm.
It's so very different to what they've done before.
Yeah.
Yes, linguistic communication. The people are communicating.
And the transitions. Oh,
Yeah.
well, credit to Sisko here. He is on board with this almost immediately.
Yeah.
Which I'm very
Well,
surprised by.
he's a Starfleet officer, and they're essentially explorers.
Yeah.
And this is,
But it's also essentially a first contact situation, too.
Mm.
First officer's log, stardate 46392.7. We're preparing to launch a rescue mission.
Good fucking luck. Go on, just say that one more time there, Major. Just one more time. Go on, say it. Grovel for it. Yay! Oh, he's such a prat. I love him really, but my God. In this episode, he's got a touch of the Wesleys.
Oh. He becomes more lovable than Wesley, I will say that.
He does, in fairness. Again, very important for them to throw that little tidbit in. Just again, just setting up the establishing everything for the character, because like Odo at that point only looks a bit like a gimmick. So now you say, oh, he actually has a character. Okay, right, we're on board now. We got this. Not yet, anyway. Give me 3 more years and I will. I would say props to all the actors here as well, because like
Mm.
in terms of like what they've been asked to do, their body language has to be completely different
Yeah.
because they're voicing themselves, but also they have to add that little tweak of like you're also not human as you're doing this. So you're basically acting like a body snatcher.
Mm.
And once we move beyond that, it becomes the past. The future. All that is still to come does not exist yet for us.
It's not exist yet.
That is the nature of living existence. And if you examine
Yeah, this is pretty deep for a first contact experience.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes some of us just kind of leave it as at a hello and we'll see you next week.
Come on, Chief, clean it up.
Ah, be grand.
Commercial mass low enough to break a bone. Procedure is not recommended. Government industry. All right.
O'Brien's fight with the computer is sometimes the best part of the first seasons of DS9.
Yep.
I know, like it was a couple of seasons later, like or episodes later than this, he's like at his wit's end trying to fix everything. Cisco's giving out about his coffee being cold. It's like, oh well, don't mind me. I'm just fixing things up. I can't go. Oh no, you know, just properly throws a strop, and I admire that. You can already tell the O'Brien is having fun here.
Oh, yes. I love how you refer to him as the O'Brien, like the Cisco. The
Yes,
O'Brien.
he is the most important person in Starfleet.
Mhm.
I think he should have his own classes there of starships at this stage.
Oh, absolutely. The
You know,
O'Brien. The
the
O'Brien
O'Brien.
class would be the most badass ship.
It'd have to be a solely like engineering class. Like it's one of the things where like oh where do you go for? Like an old adapted Defiant class would be nice.
Yeah.
Can also say as well that like Odo's makeup actually smoothens as the episode goes on. It's almost like an actual a proper difference between the first part of the episode and the second, where everyone just gets a bit cleaned up. Can you tell this is my lying voice? Thank you for your concern, but if you don't mind me, I'm going to send the wave of my own men to die. It is the Cardassian way.
Didn't realize Golden Cot was Zap Brannigan.
There's a lot of crossover, in fairness. They both can't pronounce champagne. Okay.
systems. We can't go back to the past. Something you have become. So
Also, this almost like ends up being a therapy session for him as well. Like
Yeah.
he's actually realizing, oh,
that's
and what are those things? Oh, children. You're not interested. Mhm. Pickup lines change a lot in the 24th century, don't they?
Mhm.
Now that the prophets learn about kissing for the first time. How long have you got?
but this is your existence. It's difficult to do. But the any other member of this
Exist.
They're talking about your traumatic backstory, Sisko. Hmm. Intruders. No shit.
Whoopsie.
Someone broke it?
our existence is disrupted when I don't want to break the compassion.
Hmm. I trained for years to offer lemonade to single women. After my 45th attempt, it worked.
Child was gentle. Linear. Procreation.
Hmm.
But it's the chicken I play on the hunt.
Baseball?
Right, so they're gonna have to pay attention because this is a metaphor. I can't believe they just described linear time to an alien through the medium of baseball.
Believe it, buddy.
Yep, beautiful. We're ignorant.
We are constantly searching, not just for answers to our questions, but for new questions. We're explorers. For lives. By day. And we explore the galaxy trying to expand the boundaries of our knowledge. And that is why I'm
Hmm.
not to conquer weapons and ideas. You exist here.
Now time to work over your own shit, Cisco.
Supplement. We predicted the space station, the former coordinates of the wormhole. Fortunately, scans have revealed no trace of either the wormhole or Lucan's ship. A few minutes ago, 3 Cardassian warships crossed the border. But down on their way to search for Lucan.
Hmm.
Still Brian, can you establish a high energy Thoron field before they get the sensor range? I don't want to stand this.
I say,
They're hailing us. On screen.
I am well to sign.
And I exclusively do Zoom calls from this angle. Is this very much a case of like, yeah, we have a treehouse, and you're not invited. It's like you're expecting way too much of me, pal. Really? We just cleaned it up. Fuck's sake. Been a hell of a first week on the job, eh, Kira? Last location was the Enterprise. They're doing some sort of thing with Worf. There may be it's a two-parter. There may be some time. So do you. So do you, Chief. A certain Captain Maxwell certainly took an objection to that.
What is the point of bringing that again?
Solutions from within.
Search for the hero inside yourself, Mr. Sisko. Wow, I really acted that strangely, didn't I?
Exist here. I don't know. You understand? I see her like this. Every time I close my eyes, the darkness in the print of an eye. I see her like this.
He has experienced his health preparing for this consequence.
I have always figured out how to figure it out.
Hmm. And now we've negated the entire point. Meanwhile, where everything is shit and kicking off.
Fire 6 photon torpedoes across to sides bow.
We only have 6 photons.
Let me guess. Tuesday.
How did you guess?
I do love this guy because he has a face of like someone who clearly is like someone who's farted right in front of him. This is
Yeah.
Woo.
Focus on. Hold them.
Sorry. Would you say there's a bit of an Irish correlation with the Bajorans?
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's certainly a bit of that kind of colonial angst there. Also, have you tried like looking out the window to see if there's any phasers there? Oh yeah, never think of that. Shit. Hang on, what's that music playing in the background? Nah, 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 nah. Oh, it's the Titan.
See, the thing is, fair enough. The Enterprise could be there in a day.
Hmm.
The Enterprise against one Kardashian ship is not, fine. Maybe two, but that's three.
Yeah,
Now, the Enterprise has a tough enough job trying to hold up against three birds of prey.
very
And
true.
essentially, they're less powerful than a Galore class starship.
Hmm.
So, the Enterprise against three of them? I don't think so.
That would be a bit of a tough sell, I'll be honest. In Storage Bay, no casualties. Quarks Casino has lost the money.
Ah, I just fucking cleaned that, man.
No, not the ice cream stand. No. Now I'll never know what the monthly special gelato was. That's my name.
Yum. Mr. Simpson?
Oh, people are dying. Fantastic. This is the part I come in. You know for a fact that at this stage, Julian Bashir has written fan fiction about himself. And the valiant Captain Bashir saved the entire world from plague. Teamwork. I wiggled my screwdriver out and it seemed to have worked. And at that point, everyone went, well, shit. Which is the same number as 3. doesn't believe that's why he was chuckling there. It's like, transfer pad C, I can adapt.
Good night, folks. See you later.
Thanks to me, Dr. Bashir. That it was me. I did that. No.
Station log. Commander Benjamin
Ah, yeah. Now he has turned up. You miserable bastards.
Captain's log. Sorry, I was having a problem with the holodeck. Some sort of Reginald Barkley shaped problem. How can I help? He was like, shit, lad, sketch Picard's here. Fuck! Hmm. A lot more polite the second time around.
Hmm. A little bit more.
Yeah.
But you could see Picard was on edge. He was ready to defend himself.
You can imagine
a bit angry.
Picard's probably done that thing where he's like practicing an argument in the mirror. Like, you are going to do this if it's the last thing you do. Oh, right. Can I head off? That just makes him hornier. See? And there we have it. But the actual frontier is ready for business. And that was quite a busy first episode of DS9.
Just a tad.
They went through quite a lot there, I think it's fair to say. A lot of stuff to go around, particularly in the plot department. I think I'm being very, very generous there when I say that, but however, but yeah, that is I would say like it's a hell of a hook for what they are doing here with the with Deep Space Nine. Like if you're watching this, you're thinking like, yep, I'm in. You've actually told me everything you need to tell me about this new show. And Jerry, would you agree with that assessment? In terms of this is the perfect starting off point for this show.
Pretty much, yeah, because essentially it gives you everything you need to know. You've got two new races, or fairly new races that we haven't really seen before, which is the Bajorans,
Yes.
which they're there. You know, Picard wants them to join the Federation, so obviously there's a plan in place that they want to join the Federation, and they Federation want them there as well. You've also got the Cardassians. They've literally only gone 5 minutes and they're back again. You know, so it's a sign of things to come. You can clearly see, obviously, right, this is where they're going with this. They're going to introduce these guys, and they're not just going to be one and done. They're going to be, we're here to stay, and we're going to make your lives live in hell, which is essentially what they do. You've got the relationship between Sisko and the wormhole aliens, as they would be called then, because you don't really know exactly who they are, not yet.
Mm.
Anyway, it's only starting off. So yeah, it sets up very, very nicely. Obviously, Cisco's had some sort of breakthrough with regards to, he obviously had to deal with his wife's death. He never dealt with it
Yeah.
before, and essentially he deals with it because they constantly keep like bombarding him with it,
Mm.
and he realizes no matter what, I'm always going to exist here, and I have to live with that. And he does. He essentially, yeah, he fuck off. Uh, he essentially, finally comes to terms with his wife's death,
Yeah.
and that's why this is a new, essentially a new frontier.
Yes.
And he's very happy to stay there. You could clearly see because the demeanor was completely different when it came to Picard. He was almost less dominating, we would say, than he was in the first meeting. He was angry, and that full-on anger was directed towards the man he believed killed his wife.
Yeah, it's 3 years of built-up angst, and then
Yeah,
obviously in his head he kind of interprets to a certain level, and then the one person that he never want to meet would be Locutus, and it just so happens with his assignment he has to fucking pass along with Jean-Luc. So yeah, that's the thing. Like, um, yeah, and like, I can go along. Like, it's a nice. It makes the character get like a soft reset for the first episode, and
yeah,
then everything else now is almost like a clean slate for everyone. Then it's a clean slate for the station because it's now under Bajorian rule, Bajor and Federation rule, and yeah, everyone else is kind of like, okay, now everything else can start off from this stage. So I think like I said, it was a busy episode, but it was a very good origin for everything involved. So I think it's a good way of looking at it. So anyway, so before we get to the reviews, we have a few segments here that we always tend to do whenever it comes around. So we have a very busy section for both, Jerry, this time around. We're going to go to the shipyards, which we haven't been in quite some time.
No, we haven't.
So we've already done DS9, and we've done the Borg Cube already in our travels. But there's a few ships that we are seeing here for the first time, very excitingly. And the first one that we're going to talk about is, shockingly enough, the Miranda class, because the Miranda class you will have known perhaps from the second Star Trek movie, The Wrath of Khan, which obviously we haven't done, but that is a very different kettle of fish to the, I suppose, the retrofitted Miranda class that Commander Sisko stationed on in the USS Saratoga. So a lot of these ships are essentially from the Battle of World 359, at least the ones that we've seen on this side of the battle. I don't know about rather than anything else at the moment. But the Miranda class, I suppose, is it's one of those kind of like, I think it's a very 80s looking ship, dare I say. And I say that in the nicest possible way. I love the design of it. It's genuinely one of those ones that actually properly looks like a starship. Even with the Wrath of Khan kind of variation of it, I just love both ships. I don't know if you're inclined the same way, Jerry, but every time I see one, it's just like, yeah, good to see you're still knocking about, like, you know.
Yeah, well, this is a thing you see. When it comes to the Saratoga, it's not your standard Miranda class. It is obviously a variation, but I love the look of it. When they introduced the Miranda, the Reliant, basically in Star Trek 2, it was the same as the retrofitted Enterprise, but different. Obviously, it had no secondary hull, but had the pod on the top of it. It had the nacelles closer to the saucer section, but it obviously made up for that with the type of weaponry that it had and whatnot. So I've always liked the Miranda class. When you see them throughout the course of, you see a little bit of them in the Next Generation. But you essentially see a lot of them in Deep Space Nine when it comes to the Dominion War, because during the Dominion War, they had to use every starship at their disposal. It wasn't just the nice new fancy ships that they'd built to defend themselves against the Borg. They had to use everything. So the old faithfuls, like the Excelsior class and the Miranda class, took huge center stage. It was the backbone of the fleet, both classes of ships, because they had hundreds of them, whereas compared to the other ships, they didn't have that many at the time.
That was the point. It was almost that kind of level of like we can expand with these type of vessels because they've been in service for so long.
Yeah,
Whereas like much of the point you had like 100 Miranda classes, but you only had like one Excelsior. So it's very, very important we keep that ship away from the battle because we kind of need that. That's our fallback plan in case anything goes to shit.
exactly. When it came to it, and especially in the Dominion War, a lot of the ships that you see in it would have been in mothballs for years, and they were taken out of mothballs and given slight upgrades, given extra shielding, extra weaponry, but they were essentially still older ships. Now that's not the case with the Saratoga, because you can clearly see from the Saratoga's bridge that it's had significant upgrades in terms of technology. So the bridge layout was different to other to other Miranda class bridge that we've seen, and even going so far as to Picard's first command was the Stargazer. So the Stargazer would be of the same lineage and era as the Miranda class. Obviously, it was
from say Enterprise B era onwards would be
exactly
that. Yeah.
So it went along with the same kind of Constitution refit design, same saucer section, same nacelle, stuff like that. But the bridge was clearly older because it was the older design. It was the old type of captain's chair, the old consoles and stuff like that. Whereas you can clearly see the Saratoga's bridge is completely different. It's a newer design. The two op stations are very much similar to, maybe at a slight angle, but very similar to the Enterprise. The captain's chair is very similar to the Enterprise, and then all the consoles are similar to other Starfleet ships as well. So it's obviously getting a significant upgrade, and it seems to be bigger than a normal Miranda class as well. You would kind of, when you're comparing ships and sizes and things like that, I've always compared the Miranda to a bird of prey in terms of style, weapons, speed, maneuverability, stuff like that. Then I would always kind of lump in the Excelsior to like a D7. You know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily say a Vorcha, because you would then, when it comes to comparing ships, the Vorcha would be akin to Galaxy for the Klingons, you know. So the Miranda has always been like the Bird of Prey. The Bird of Prey is the backbone of the Klingon fleet, as the Miranda is the backbone of Federation fleet. I've always liked the design. I've always liked those ships. Whenever I've played like online games or like any Star Trek games, I like strategy ones. So ones where you can build fleets. I always have lots and lots of Mirandas and Excelsiors because they are the backbone. It's a really nice design, a really nice looking ship. I've always liked it. Not so much the Saratoga, because
you're more the kind of the Reliant style.
The Reliant style. So the one with the sensor pod, and obviously the sensor pod can be taken out and a weapons pod put in. So the Reliant style was, it got rid of the top part and put two sensor things on the sides, which I didn't really like as much. But essentially, the Miranda class is one of my favorite ships in Star Trek, and I think it's a lovely design, and it's great to see it in Deep Space Nine. And of course, we're going to see a lot more of it as the seasons progress.
Absolutely, indeed we will. So in that case, then where would you rank it on the class? So again, for those uninitiated, we go from ensign, we go all the way up the command rank. So from ensign to lieutenant to commander, captain, or admiral. Where does the Miranda class land? Now, for this, we're combining both the Reliant and Miranda, so kind of a mixed rank, let's say, because we won't get to movies on the series here. So,
well, I suppose we can essentially, because there's many different variants of the Miranda, so we can essentially lump them all together and judge them as one. And in that sense, I'd be inclined to go with captain, because it's a great design. It's an absolute workhorse. It's the type of ship that does border patrols and reconnaissance and you know, it is the absolute backbone of the Federation fleet. So I would definitely go for captain.
Yep, I'm actually agreeing with you on captain. I think that's the best place for it, because it's one of those ships where like it has a kind of Stargazer like effect to it, where like if you're a captain and you have a Miranda class, you're gonna fall in love with it, and then you probably would get to a bigger ship and you're still like pining for for the claustrophobic submarine that you came out from. Like it's almost a weird form of Stockholm syndrome almost, but however. Anyway, the next one we're going to talk about, a bit of a rare ship in terms of actually being used on on Star Trek, but does have a significance is the Ambassador class, which we would know better more as the Enterprise C. We don't see a lot of it, in fairness, in Star Trek, particularly in the Next Generation.
No,
We see it most in DS9, really.
you saw it. Obviously, there was from my memory anyway. There was two. Let me. I hope I get this right now. There was yesterday's Enterprise, obviously.
Yeah.
That, and then also you saw one in. Let me see if I can remember the name of the episode. It was not Redemption. It was. Oh yes, no Redemption.
Yep,
yes, Redemption. So when Picard is building his fleet to stop the Romulans entering into the Klingon Civil War, he essentially gets a fleet of different starships, and one of them is a Ambassador class. You can clearly see
the
that.
Excalibur, to be precise.
There we go, the Excalibur. So you can clearly you've only ever seen them twice in terms of Star Trek. I think the only times you saw them were those two times, and then this episode. You saw them around the class attacking the Borg cube, and I don't think you ever saw it again.
Essentially, yeah, and I think whenever it is like on screen, it's more or less getting blown up, for all intents and purposes. So yeah, it doesn't feature that much in the actual TV show, which is a bit of a shame because like the model is clearly there. You might as well fucking use it, type of shit. But in terms of the design, it's very clearly meant to be like it is one of those things where obviously they had the Excelsior model from the movies and you had the Galaxy class from the Next Generation, and in the kind of the what if of like what would the ship between these look like, what is the intermediary between these two, this is essentially the ship you get the new deflector dish, you get a very square, again quite kind of almost like boxy type of arrangement to it, and a kind of a weird like what I call like almost like a plateaued saucer, in that it starts off flat, bends, and then comes underneath, much like you'd expect the Excelsior to have kind of morphed over time. But obviously they come more of an elliptic kind of shape to it. So it seems very boxy. It seems very efficient almost the way it's done. But then obviously it didn't catch on that much because the Galaxy class just came in and wiped the floor with everything else. So I would be intrigued to see what the internal logic of was like. When the other class seemed to do well for maybe 15 years, and then we just got rid of it. We just sacked it off. Yeah. It turned out there was a design flaw. The battery exploded every now and then. Like I don't know. It's a weird one.
No, the front fell off.
Fuck. Do you know what it was? We forgot to put in the sauce separation. Fucking yeah, fine. The front did fall off. Or maybe it was a case where like the Enterprise C got blown up and went like, well, clearly that's not fucking worth it, right? Back to drawing board, lads. And the one thing I'll say about it, I like the idea, I like the premise of it in the sense where like it makes sense that the ship would look like this. The one thing I would say about it is because you've seen so very little of the interiors, it's very hard to judge. Because based on yesterday's Enterprise, it's a tiny bridge. It's so fucking small. Like you see very, very little of it.
I wouldn't say it's a tiny bridge. When you actually compare it to the Enterprise D bridge, it is actually bigger.
I suppose it looks small on camera.
It's about as deep as the Enterprise D, but it is far wider. As far as I'm aware, they would have used the Enterprise A bridge or similar to actually outfit it for yesterday's Enterprise. Yeah. It was very simple because it was the same consoles, the same chairs and things like that. Because obviously
the rail around the
exactly, seat. Yeah. And they were still using the older uniforms then at the time. What I found interesting about it is that when it comes to Star Trek, and especially going from the original series to Next Generation, and then DS9, is that they were still using obviously the Miranda and the Excelsior classes, the classes that were 100 years old, whereas they could have used the Ambassador class as the replacement for the Excelsior, and had that as the workhorse of the fleet. And then even say a slightly upgraded version of our Miranda, because obviously when you look at certain things, when you look at the Enterprise and the Reliant, so from Enterprise 2, you look at the two ships and they're of similar design but different, no secondary hull. Then you have to look at what translates as the new Constitution class in Next Generation and the new Miranda class in Next Generation. But that's got to be the Galaxy class and the Nebula class, because the Nebula would be to the Enterprise D as the Miranda was, or the Reliant
the
was
successor.
the Enterprise.
Exactly. Same premise.
But again, it's the type of thing where you could have seen a lot more Nebula class, which we did. In fairness, in Enterprise we did see, not Enterprise, in Next Generation we did see the Miranda class a couple of times, but you could have seen a lot more of them. You could have seen a lot more of the Miranda class. And in terms of the fleet, before the Dominion Wars and before the upgraded Borg anti-Borg fleet, if you'd have seen a lot more of those, Starfleet wouldn't have seemed as weak, because essentially when you're looking at if there was a war, forgetting about the Borg enhanced ships and things like that, if there was a war, would they win? And you have to bring it back to yesterday's Enterprise. It essentially, that's the only ships they were using. They were only using a handful of Galaxies, a handful of Mirandas, because at that time there would have only been a handful. So the majority of the fleet would have been built up of old Miranda and Miranda, probably Constitution classes were still being used, and then Excelsior classes. And they got their ass handed them. The Klingons were beaten. They would have had to surrender. One more, as they said, one more ship in the here and now wasn't going to make a blind bit of difference. If they had decided, okay, well, we're going to replace the Miranda and Constitution with ambassadors, with nebulas, and with galaxies, they wouldn't have been considered quite as a pushover, because they were essentially, that's what they were. The Federation were a pushover. They were a pushover. Look what happened to Wolf 359. Tens of thousands of people dead. 40 plus starships destroyed, and with ease.
I was going to say the ambassador gets spanked in the opening sequence there. It gets torn to shreds. So that might suggest why there wasn't many in service, because perhaps they weren't that good a design, unfortunately, compared to something like the Excelsior, which is very proven to be more robust. So, and the Constitution class for that matter as well.
But then you look at, you have to look then at the Dominion War. If they had less nebulas, less Excelsiors and less Mirandas, and had more nebulas and more ambassadors, would it have gone differently? Because they were far more powerful ships than Mirandas and Excelsiors. I know they were able to upgrade them, and even Galaxies during the Dominion War were upgraded to the Venture refit. The Venture refit of the Galaxy gave it far superior shielding, far superior armor, and more weapons, if that's even possible, because a Galaxy class starship has so many phaser arrays, two photon torpedo launchers and so many phaser arrays, and it gave additional phaser arrays to Galaxy classes during the war. So it's like, Jesus, this is a proper battleship. That's what you're creating, is a battleship essentially. So it kind of begs the question, if they'd actually replaced the Excelsior and Miranda, what would have happened?
Indeed,
but that's a question for another day.
Indeed, it is, and kind of that's in the kind of the lost era of Star Trek at the moment, where those questions haven't been answered yet. Again, the key word is yet, because they're still making Star Trek as a time of recording. So, in regards then, where would you put the Ambassador class? So I feel like, again, this very feels like a ship at a time, and a ship kind of neglected.
Absolutely, very much neglected. You could have taken the design, the outwards design of it, upgraded it to standard Starfleet operating system on the inside. Upgraded screens, upgraded warp core, upgraded everything, and it would have brought the Ambassador up to essentially just under the Galaxy. In terms of the design and what we've seen of it, it's quite a nice looking ship. It has this lovely big deflector array. I've always liked that about it. Right. It's a proper circular saucer section, very similar to the likes of the Constitution. You can see clearly that where they were going to go with the nacelles, because essentially nacelles are kind of half the design of a Constitution and half the design of a Galaxy, and trying to blend them together. So you could see that we were trying to integrate past and present and say, this is the precursor to the Galaxy class. It's quite a nice looking ship. thing is, it wouldn't be one of my favorites. So I'd have to go commander on this one. I wouldn't go any higher than that. I don't know
Yeah,
whether you agree with that or not, but I wouldn't
no,
go any
actually,
higher
I'm
than
actually
commander.
okay with that being kind of commander because, like I said, it's a nice design. It just didn't get any love, and I think that's a kind of a fair cop at the end of the day. Like I think it's just one of those ships that was there really. And yeah, I think that's just a fair assessment of it really.
Mm.
You kind of hit it on the nail there. So next one we're going to talk about is one we actually just mentioned just there, Jerry. Is the Nebula class.
Mhm.
Which is essentially a miniaturized galaxy ship for all intents and purposes. Think of saucer, nacelles, and sensor pods, and your Raina hack. That's a nebula. So it's kind of a case of perhaps the logic here is that instead, if you didn't want to spend time making a galaxy class with a secondary hull and everything that kind of in between, and you have enough to basically make a miniaturized version, this is it essentially.
Mhm.
But it still comes with the same effects. It just doesn't have a secondary hull, which I suppose in wartime is actually quite useful because it means you might be able to scuttle ships fairly quickly. Especially if you have say half of it intact thereabouts or enough to recycle essentially and basically get it back out onto the battlefield. So
Yeah.
again, it's one of those ones where I actually there's a lot of variations of the Nebula class.
Mm.
So for instance, we've seen one called the Sutherland that has a very kind of weird deflector and like an Enterprise style deflector, but then also has the massive like module, the triangular module, which I think is a weapons module. I can't
That's the
remember.
That one is the weapons pod. So
Yeah.
there's essentially three different variations of a nebula. I don't know
Mhm.
the name of the variations, but one is purely scientific. It's a purely
Yes.
scientific pod. The other one is a combination of science and weapons, and then the Sutherland, the Sutherland and the Wounded, the one from the Wounded, Maxwell ship. That was
The Phoenix.
the Phoenix. That was a
Yeah.
weapons pod one as well. Well, clearly because he went in and destroyed a number of Galore class ships with that ship. That was essentially just a purely weapons pod. Now, again, it was Starfleet at the time was still exploring and trying to meet new races and whatnot. But obviously, they sent their ships out with a lot more defenses because of past experience. But when it comes to the Nebula class, when it comes to my favorite ships in Star Trek, my favorite is the Galaxy. If I could give the Galaxy obviously we go from ensign all the way up to admiral. If I could give Galaxy God, I will give it God. It's as simple as that. But I can't give it God, so I had to give it admiral. This essentially would be as close you can get as the Galaxy, and it's my second favorite Starfleet ship because it's so close to that. Would I give it the same as Galaxy? I don't think so. Just simply because it's not the Galaxy. It's the next best thing. Yeah, it's the next best thing, but it's still not a Galaxy, so it would have to go Captain. In terms of that, I think it's a fantastic design. We don't see enough of the ship. We only see it a handful of times. We obviously saw it there with fighting the Borg. You see it. I think maybe. I don't think you even see it that much. You do see it during the Dominion War in a couple of the fight scenes, but not very much. In terms of focusing on the Nebula class, I think in Deep Space Nine, I think you might only see it 3 times in terms of focusing on it. You see it when it's docked. When you see it when the Vulcan captain comes to challenge Sisko to a baseball game. You see it when him and Ducat are being transferred from one starbase to another, and then you obviously see it in this episode here. You see it in a couple of other, it might be in the background of Deep Space Nine at one point. It might be in a fighting sequence during the Dominion War. But you essentially don't see that much of it, and it's a shame because it's a lovely, lovely ship. It really is. I think the design is fantastic. It is up there with the Galaxy class. And again, it should have been one of those things that these should be the backbone of the Federation fleet, not the Excelsior and the Miranda. So yeah, I would give it Captain. Yeah, I couldn't give it Admiral because the Galaxy is the Admiral.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I'll go with you on the Captain as well. Much of the same kind of logic. It is just like it is essentially a mini Enterprise is the way I always remember it as a kid. It's like, oh, that's a small Enterprise, and I never knew it as anything else. Like, I don't care if it's a Nibber class, I don't care whatever is the name, but that's a mini Enterprise. That's how I know it. That's how I refer to it from this point on, and I still do, to be honest. That has not changed. So, next up then is the last of the Starfleet ships we use, and again we were kind of slagging it off during the recording because it was as useful as an ashtray on a motorbike. The Oberth class that doesn't have any ship has one phaser bank.
I'm all I'm going to say is, it's going to be cadet. I know we only go from ensign, but it's going to be cadet.
Yeah,
we first saw this ship in the movies, and it was as useless then as it is now.
Yeah,
I don't think
it seems like every single time you see it, it's asking for help.
It's not particularly a nice design. Whenever you see it in either the movies or in the Next Generation, like that, like what you're saying there, it's always asking for help.
Yeah.
Why you would send a ship that small and that like, I'm trying to get the words, less equipped than any other ship.
Undercooked, maybe.
Undercooked, basically. You could send a Miranda to do the same thing, and at least Miranda had phasers and photon torpedoes. This guy had one phaser bank.
Yeah.
It's singular phaser bank, and it was probably a Type 1 that wouldn't even scratch the surface of any ship. So it's the thing is like, why? What's the point in this ship? No, even medical ships had more weapons than the Oberth class. And a runabout has more weapons than an Oberth class. That's amazing. And a runabout, as small as it is, has three phaser banks.
Yeah.
No, they have three.
Three. Yeah. The one on top.
Well, it all depends on what, because there's different variations. But you've got one with two like dual forward facing cannons or phaser banks. Then you've got ones with a forward facing and then a rear facing one. Then you've got ones with the two forward plus the torpedo pod. So that's more than an Oberth class. They have fucking loads of Oberth class and give them one bloody -1 phaser. And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no point, literally no point in that ship.
Yeah, that's fair. And like I said, the most, like, the one that we would see the most, I suppose, is the Pegasus. Like, that was the prototype for the I suppose you'd call the
phase cloak,
the Federation cloaking device, the phase cloaking device. That's what
the phase cloak. Yeah.
And like I said, that's kind of what it was. It was essentially a prototype for that, and it was a served as a scout ship. But as I said, it's not much of a scout ship because it can't defend itself. So what was the fucking point, essentially? But yeah, that's the Oberth class, well and truly at the bottom of the pile. Last then we're going to talk about is a ship that we're going to see quite a lot of if we're watching Deep Space Nine. That's the Cardassian Galar class. So maybe this is me from kind of like looking at it from a very kind of aesthetic point of view. I always felt that this looked a bit like a Scorpion.
Yes.
And it kind of was very appropriate considering that, like, the Cardassians have a Scorpion motif to their design. So it's something I do quite like when the ships and aliens kind of match up in a way, because I'd like to think that's how we also shape up as well, because you've got the head, the saucer being the head, the nacelles being the legs type of premise, and the body being the hull and so forth. So I think that's, like, if we're going to be a humanoid shape, then that would be how our vessel would look. And likewise, being the Cardassians, they have that sort of aesthetic to the way they do their ships as well. And like I said, it's a very common class we see. There's very good reason. It's a pretty big fucking deal of a ship. It's a very, very impressive vessel. 4 phaser banks, large disruptors, gets to about warp 8, which is quite slow in relative terms, especially to the point of time where we're getting to it. But a still great design, though, in fairness. And again, that kind of very small, it's a very small and simple thing, but the fact that it is that kind of brownish, sandy color, it's a Cardassian ship, and that's all you need to really know in a sense. Shape-wise, though, I'm a big fan of it. And it doesn't say it's welcome either, because you do get a few other classes, especially towards the end of DS9, where you'd recognize them more kind of dreadnoughts than these kind of more tidier ships, so we say. But yeah, so where would you rank the Galar class
But
Jerry?
when it comes to the Galar class, it's one of my favorite we'll say enemy ships.
Mm-hmm.
From when the first time we saw it, which was in well, obviously in this episode, and then we see them again in Next Generation.
Yeah.
I always felt like that, the Scorpion feel, absolutely, but I always felt an Egyptian feel to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. It
Yeah,
just
actually, I get that
had an
too. You're
Egyptian
right. Yeah.
feel to it. The design absolutely fantastic, and then of course we went later on. We see a different variant of it, which was the Galore and the it was a bigger version, a slightly bigger version of it,
Mm.
with more weapons and more armor and stuff like that.
I think it's the Keldon class, I believe.
Keldon class, that's exactly it. It's kind of got wings, almost like wings at the back end where the tail
Mm.
is. It's got more weaponry. It's got a bigger pod on the top of it. It just it's a more sinister version of a Galore class.
Mm.
But it's essentially the entire fleet is made up of Keldon and Galore class ships. They're
Mm.
very similar. It's a fantastic design. It screams bad guy, is what it does to me. It screams
It
bad
is a
guy.
good villain ship, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
kind of got the bridge is kind of sticking out over the front of it. It's got this massive phaser bank right at the front
Mm.
there. And I think what they did was they did it a disservice in the first episode there, because they essentially when you see it in even the last episode of Deep Space Nine, when that massive phaser
Mm.
cannon at the front fires, it's a proper phaser discharge. Whereas
Yes.
in this episode, it's just like this tiny little red line come out of the middle of it, and I'm like, make it bigger, lads. Make it
I
bigger.
think, yeah, I can do better than that, can't it? Like,
Exactly. Make it bigger. I think they're a fantastic ship, a fantastic design. It leads on obviously to the Keldon class, and then you've got the Hideki class that comes from it. Then it's essentially you've got three different classes. It's kind of like every race really, apart from the
Yeah.
Romulans. Every race has three different classes. You've got the Hideki, which would be along the same lines as the Bird of Prey and the Miranda. You've got the Galore, which would be along the same lines as an Excelsior and a D7, and then you've got the Keldon, which would be along the lines of a Vorcha and a Galaxy class.
Exactly. Yeah.
A Galaxy could easily take on a Galore class, hands down. But if you've got three of them against a Galaxy, probably not so much.
Yeah, it's a different story altogether.
Yeah, it's kind of like we finally got to see Hideki. I think we see Hideki class in maybe first or second season of Deep Space Nine, but then obviously they become more prominently especially in Sacrifice of Angels.
Yes.
Fantastic
more
episode.
fodder. Yeah.
And you see them there because obviously they needed to bulk out the fleet, because you couldn't just have Galore classes, so they needed to bulk it out. So in that fleet, you see Galore, you see Keldon, you see Hideki, you obviously see the Jem'Hadar fighters and the Jem'Hadar battleships. All fantastic, all along the same designs. All the Cardassian ships are along the same designs. Hideki is essentially just a smaller version of a Keldon. It's brought the tail in. It's got rid of the wings, and you've got a kind of a roundy bit at the front rather than that. It's got another big cannon that's kind of hidden essentially on the Hideki, compared to the Keldon and the Galore. So they've all fantastic design. As I said, it kind of got this Egyptian vibe off them, but the workhorse is always going to be the Galore, because it's the one you always see. How many times did Gul Dukat turn up in a Galore class?
I was gonna say it's the first ship that comes to mind when you think Cardassians. So
exactly, you get to see them more up close, I think, than any other episode, is when you've got Thomas Riker taking over the Defiant, and he's blowing up Galores, and then Keldon's turn up then as well, and then you really get to see the Defiant when it gets encompassed with the shields of the Galore class. You get to see the detail of the Galore class. Such a fantastic ship, absolutely fantastic design. It's a great ship, and as I said, it screams bad guy, screams evil. So I've got to go captain with this one as well. A lot of captains in this episode, but that is an absolutely fantastic ship.
we're going captain on this one.
Yeah.
Yep, and I'm happy to go to oblige. To be honest, it's been a good episode for ships. That is a one fair thing we can say about this episode. And we can also say it's also been a very good episode for guest stars because there's a fucking lot of them. So we're gonna try and get through this as quick as we can. So, we're gonna start off with the one and done's first. Although this one admittedly is a bit of a cheat, so we'll go with the minor characters first. So, the first one we're going to talk about is April Grace. She's the actress herself, and you will notice her from the Next Generation, namely as one of the transporter chiefs, Chief Hubel. She appears in a couple of episodes, pretty much as kind of like the extra to O'Brien, if you will. Now, I won't penalize you on this one, Jerry, but she has actually featured a second time in Star Trek, quite recently, as a matter of fact, because she is in Star Trek Picard as Admiral Sally Whitley, who appears in the. She's essentially the one that briefs Picard on the Borg, asking for his assistance.
Okay.
So that is the same actress, separated by what, about 25 years thereabouts.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like quite a good bit away, but yeah, so she plays both of those characters. Now, in regards to the actress herself, she was she actually moved. She was born in Florida, but she moved to Saudi Arabia in 1978, and later went to England to educate for education. She went back to the USA then, and operated more or less out of Pasadena in California. So Grace had a remarkable lot of work, a lot of guest parts, namely in the likes of, say, the X-Files, Touched by an Angel, Promised Land I'm seeing here as well, and she was in the drama series Chicago Hope as well, and in a few kind of other, a lot of guest roles, really, like the likes of Renegade and NYPD Blue and so forth. She was also in the I suppose one of her best roles was perhaps as Sergeant Tony Williams in the drama Joan of Arcadia. She was in about 15 to 20 episodes of that, and she was again a detective in the miniseries The Lost Room. So a lot of police worlds actually, as it turns out here, and again a lot of guest roles from there, and has been in some films as well. So quite a lot of work in that sense, and she does appear in a good bit of Star Trek to boot. So we won't say no to that from our sense. So now we move on then to some of the multiple roles. So these ones I am going to quiz you on, Jerry. So let's talk about Stephen Davies. That's the name of the actor. How many roles has he played in Star Trek?
Well, before I answer that, who did he play in this episode?
He was the Bolian tactical officer in the
on the
in
Saratoga.
flashbacks and also in the Prophets. So yes, he was the Bolian.
This one I don't actually know, but I'm going to hazard a guess. If he played multiple roles.
Multiple roles.
I'm going to hazard a guess and say 3.
And you will be correct with 3. So obviously he is the Bolian tactical officer, unnamed in the script. Unfortunately, he's just referred to as the tactical officer. But the other roles he plays he is Araktaral rather. He is the Jem'Hadar in the episode Hippocratic Oath. I believe he's the one with the talking role, and the one that's like, you know, the guys are trying to detox off the Ketracel White.
Yeah.
He's the talking role in that, if I'm not mistaken.
He's the main Jem'Hadar.
I believe he is, yes.
Jeez, you wouldn't have guessed. I would never have guessed that.
I'm just double checking here. Is he the second one? I think he's actually the second in command.
Yes, I was just thinking, because the guy who plays the first one, he's in other roles as well.
Yes, that's right. That's Scott McDonald plays him. No, that's Garan Agar is the main in that episode, but Arak Taral is his deputy. So he gets a few speaking roles in there, but he eventually does get killed off in that episode. The other role he plays is actually in Voyager. In the episode Darkling, which is in the middle of the 3rd season, he plays the character Nakan, who is one of the Mikhail travelers that Voyager encounters. He owns the refueling outpost near Tarkin Space, and has the kind of interactions with Janeway. He's the one that tells her about a living asteroid that he encountered, and names it here, and basically kind of progress the plot essentially from there. And also it's the one with the evil doctor, Dr. Kess, I think it's that episode, and essentially again just was there to advance the plot. But that's actually the one role where he's not under massive amounts of prosthetics, so you actually see what the guys look like, which I'm sure is a refreshing change of pace for him. Funny enough, actually, the jacket he wore for that episode of Darkling was sold off in an auction of That's a Wrap, or It's a Wrap rather, sale on eBay, and apparently was reused in several DS9 episodes. So there you go, fun fact. In terms of his other roles, he is again a lot of guest roles, namely if you want to look at Troy here, Starsky and Hutch and Dallas, Chips and Alias is where he pops up in a few of them, and a few kind of like stand-in roles in that sense as well. But yeah, so 3 roles in Star Trek for him. Next up then is Joel Swetow, or Sitow perhaps. I'm just going by butchering pronunciations here. So Joel in this episode plays Gul Jasad, the angry, gurning Cardassian that Kira had bants with.
Now, for me, there was something about his voice, and I think I'm going to be wrong by this.
Okay.
But did he play before I guess how many characters he did? Did he play a Xindi?
No.
And I don't know him because the voice. So something about the face and the voice. I thought he played one of the main Xindi characters, the one that kind of helps them in the end. I
know who you're talking about, but that's not him.
I thought that was him, but it's obviously not him. So I'm gonna go 4.
4 is a good attempt, but it is wrong. It's 3. So yeah, he plays Gul Jasad in this episode, and that's his only Cardassian role. He is also he's one of the few actually does a hat trick of Star Trek shows. He's in DS9. He's also in TNG as the character Yog in the episode Firstborn. So Yog is one that was probably easier to pick out as a picture. He's a Uridian, Captain Frater. He's the one that basically buys ore from the Duras sisters. And before the transaction, the Enterprise arrives basically, and Riker contacts him, and he was looking for a biomimetic gel. He's one of those kind of real kind of shifty creatures that wants to do illegal shit. And he just appears for that scene essentially and goes from there. But yeah, he's a character where you recognize him by face more than anything else, from the makeup. So in the video, you'll see in the edit what he actually looks like. But he's in the episode Firstborn, which is the season 7.
Season 7,
yeah. Now, he also completes his hat trick of Star Trek entries by being in the Enterprise episode Terra Prime. He is Ambassador Thoris, the Andorian ambassador that appears in that episode. So he is the one that obviously I think he kind of raises awareness about the Terra Prime sect. And again, he's obviously played by Joel Swetow in that one. So he played, I think he is definitely the Andorian ambassador. Yes, he's the one that's at the table for the Coalition of Planets. That's who that is in that episode. As opposed to the actor himself, obviously he's played those different roles. You may also recognize his voice because he has lent his voice to a lot of Star Trek video games. He's been in both Armada games. He's also been in Invasion and Voyager Elite Force. So you might actually recognize his voice from the games as well.
Played them all. So I'm going to have to go back and see what he did in those games.
Yes,
absolutely.
Indeed. And he does a lot of sci-fi, in fairness. In terms of the credits, he's been in Crusade, which was a Babylon 5 spin-off. He's also been in The Orville, Stargate, Alias, and Lucifer. So there you go. So he's been around.
A lot of sci-fi.
And he starred in the movie Return to the Secret Garden with former guest star Michelle Horn. So there you go. So that is Joel Swetow covered. Next up then is Steve Rankin.
Give us a bit of context here. Who did he play?
He is the Cardassian officer that tries to argue the Gull out of confrontation with Deep Space Nine.
Okay, don't know him. I'm going to say 2.
And the correct answer is 4 for this one. So these are relatively minor roles. I'll get you to the minor roles first, because the Cardassian Officer Number 3, as he's called in the script, is perhaps his most minor role. We've mentioned he features in another DS9 episode called Invasive Procedures, which is the second season episode. He is one of the Klingons, a Klingon mercenary called Yeto, and he's the one that's trying to steal the symbiont from Dax. If you recall, he was meant to guard Bashir in the infirmary and was knocked out by Bashir himself, which I'm sure Bashir tells everyone about all the time. And remember, he's also in Enterprise. He's in the episode Demons, which is from season 4. He is Colonel Green. Funny enough, called Philip Green Philip Green was played by 2 roles. He was in the Enterprise episodes as well. The original series episode, and he was kind of portrayed as one of these despotic militia leaders during World War III. And essentially in the Enterprise, so he's portrayed by someone else in the original series by obvious reasons, but then in the Enterprise episode, he is played by Steve Rankin here, and essentially he's an eco-terrorist by all intents and purposes. And I think in the year that this was set in the episode that was set in, I think let's see, reading here, here we go. Yes, he's portrayed as he's regarded as a genocidal madman who basically slaughtered millions to save the environment. That's what the kind of presentation was. So it was basically a posthumous view of Green, resulting in debates and policies and the like, and kind of set up Terra Prime, for want of a better word, as in it was the leader Terra Prime basically used him as a bit of an inspiration, let's say. And like I said, we have the I think actually he also, the character Colonel Green also appears in the illustration when Data is reading about the Dixon Hill kind of series and so forth. He's like one of the little kind of pop-ups that appear. So he plays a despot in Enterprise. However, his most prominent role is actually as Patak, which is the Romulan from the episode The Enemy. You recall the episode where Geordi gets stranded on a stormy planet along with a Romulan?
Yes.
And they have to work together. Yes, that is perhaps his most prominent role in Star Trek. He is the Romulan from that episode.
The voice. Yeah, you can hear the voice now, yeah. Okay.
There you go, yeah. So, funny enough, Stephen Rankin, this is a very fun fact, he is a member of the Enterprise Blues Band, which writes and performs songs about Star Trek. The other members are Von Armstrong, Richard Hurd, Casey Biggs, William Jones, and Ronald B. Moore. Rankin is the mandolin player, and he sings some of the backup vocals.
They are obviously when they comes to Star Trek conventions, they're always there and they always play, but they always meet fans and go to the hotel. That fans will go to the hotel where they're staying.
Yeah,
they'll sing, they'll drink together the whole lot, but they're always on the Star Trek cruise. They're always on the Star Trek cruise, and apparently they're one of the highlights of the cruise because they're fantastic together. You know, obviously Vaughn Armstrong and Casey Biggs, obviously 2 very prominent actors in Star Trek. And very, very popular, because I have to say when I went to Birmingham for Destination, those 2 were there and they were extremely popular. So I can understand why the band would be popular as well. That's interesting now that he's in the band. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, he's a mandolin player. How about that? The more you know. These are things you learn when you're looking up Wikipedia articles, I suppose. Now, next up then is some one and dones, but very important roles in that sense. So we'll start off with Felicia M. Bell, who played Jennifer Sisko. So technically plays her twice, as in Sisko herself, and then the mirror Jennifer Sisko, who appears in some of the mirror universe episodes. But there's very little else to say in terms of the role. We obviously know Jennifer Sisko quite well from various DS9 episodes. In terms of the actress herself, she features a lot in Days of Our Lives and General Hospital. She was on them for quite some time, a couple of years as a matter of fact. And she's also guest starred in the likes of Smallville, JAG, Law and Order, and Law and Order Special Victims Unit. So you'll probably see her in a couple of episodes there as well. But yes, in terms of Star Trek new ones, very much just Jennifer Sisko, and that is it. Next up then is the actress who played Kai Opaka, who in this case was Camille Saviola, Camille unfortunately died last year. Funny enough, she's age 71. Um, so quite a lot of work, as you can imagine, from over the years. So she, you mentioned she had one very prominent episode of Friends,
Mhm.
where she portrayed the Friends landlord, the mother. So yeah, she's been quite busy in that sense. Quite memorable appearance in that regard. But she's also been in other things as well. She was Turtle's mother in Entourage from 2006 and 2009. And she was also cast in a few Woody Allen movies, mainly Broadway Danny Rose, The Purple Rose of Cairo, and Shadows on Fog. She also in other movies with Adam's Family Values and Penn and Teller Get Killed. She's also in those movies as well, and of course a few guest roles in ER. Nip Tuck is one as well, and Without a Trace, funny enough, and NYPD Blue. So she's been in a couple of various different roles. And yeah, she died at the age of 71 in her home in Los Angeles. But yeah, she was quite a. I always remember like from the first time I was watching the show, I always felt like Kyle Packer was in more episodes, but she actually isn't. She's only in like 3 or 4, I think, practically. Like one and done in the first season, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it gets a.
She's in one episode there where she obviously meets Cisco. Then she's in another
Yes.
episode where she visits a station. They go into the Gamma Quadrant and she gets stranded on a planet there because she can't leave, because if she leaves she dies.
Yes,
And then there is
exactly.
another episode where it's not really her, it's like an orb experience prophet-y type situation.
It's a flashback more so, yeah.
Yeah.
So that does sound about right, yeah. Now then, Jerry, we get to the main event. The real main event this time. Because this is the first time we've encountered the two heavyweights of Star Trek acting. The first one name I'm going to throw to you here is Mark Alamo. Now, how many characters has he portrayed in Star Trek?
I instantly think of 3. So
Okay.
he played the first Romulan we see in the Next Generation.
Okay.
He played the first Cardassian we see in the Next Generation. He played Gul Dukat. He played the police officer in Cisco's Vision when he was a writer. So that's 4.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's another Next Generation, or possibly the original series, but I'm gonna go with the 4.
You're going to go with 4 roles. Okay. The correct answer, Jerry, is 6 roles.
Fuck.
Yes, shockingly enough.
What 2 did I miss?
Okay, well, we'll go through the ones you got right. So he did indeed play, obviously, Gul Dukat was his most prominent one from DS9. The detective he played in Far Beyond the Stars is called Burt Ryan. He plays that with Jeremy Combs, Jeffrey Combs, rather. But shocking enough, he's actually been in the Next Generation 4 times, right? 4 times. So Tabok was the Romulan we saw in the Neutral Zone.
Yeah.
Gul Macet was the Cardassian he played in The Wounded. The 2 you missed, however, and I didn't know this actually until watching this. So you remember the episode Lonely Among Us? I believe it was the first season, first season. And you know you had those kind of like feline looking guys who were hunting on deck of the Enterprise. And the ones that go like the Antikins, they're called. The ones that go, how sickening. Those boys, yeah. That was actually Mark Alamo under all that prosthetics, would you believe?
I'd have never known that.
Well, you wouldn't have, because he was actually uncredited for a long, long time, until recently the Mark Alamo did actually admit to playing that sickening fellow who was hunting the fish.
And what was the last one?
The last one, he's actually in the episode Time's Arrow. If you recall,
he was the poker player.
He was the poker player, Frederick LaRocque.
Fuck.
Yes.
God, so you bastard.
Yeah, I know. There's always one though. This is the fucker. It is always one. And yeah, like, so in regards to Mark Allen himself, like, a fucking hell of a career. particularly in Star Trek. Like I said, his nickname is the Neck, because his neck muscles very much inspired the design for the Cardassians overall. So again, much like kind of like Zimmerman kind of inspired with his kind of like his body language, the Ferengis, the literal neck of Mark
Of
Alamo
Mark
inspired
Alamo.
of our Mark Alamo, the neck inspired the Cardassians, which is absolutely exceptional. And again, he sold off a lot of his costumes and so forth. In terms of his career, like he's had a fucking incredible amount of
He's
work.
been in everything.
Yes, he has. He really, really has. Like he's had recurring roles in subs like Somerset. He's been in shows like Gunsmoke and Kojak, Barnaby Jones, Starsky and Hutch, Chips, The Incredible Hulk, Wonder Woman, Charlie's Angels, Knight Rider, T.J. Hooker, the A-Team, Walker, Texas Ranger, Hill Street Blues. He was a recurring role in that one in particular as Gene Scapizzi. And he's also been in some kind of movies as well, which we'll kind of skim through because they're all like relatively forgettable. In terms of his actual films, then he was in the movie Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, where he was also he was also in the Richard Pryor comedy Which Way Is Up. Mean Dog Blues he was in as well. And he was in the 1980 movie Seems Like Old Times, and he's also in the series The Deadpool, which is part of the Clint Eastwood movies, if I'm not mistaken. And he's also in the movie Arena, and also in Tango and Cash. He's also in Total Recall,
a lot
The
of
Naked
work.
Gun 3 as well. Like he's been a busy man, very, very busy man, but obviously found his home, if you will, in Star Trek with so many of his reoccurring and fantastic characters, as we said. Now, we get to one of your friends, Mr. Jerry Soul, J.G. Hertzler.
I do not want to get this wrong.
Now,
Okay.
so
his first role in Star Trek was Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So he's in this episode. He plays the Vulcan captain.
Yeah.
Okay. Martok. The changeling that Odo finds.
Yeah, we're gonna count the Martok and the Changeling as a one. So if we speak it to just the
No, not that changeling.
Oh, you mean
there's the other changeling? Yeah, the other changeling that they meet in season.
Sorry, I thought you meant the imposter. Grant, fair enough. Yeah.
So that's three so far. You've got the newspaper guy from Sisko's vision.
Yep, character's called Roy Ritterhouse.
Right. So that's 4 for Deep Space Nine. Then in Voyager, he is in the Tonkatsu episode.
Yep, he was a Hirogen fighter.
That's 5. Then we move on to Enterprise, where he plays a Klingon, the Klingon defendant that was defending Archer.
Yeah.
Then an unnamed Klingon captain.
Yes.
So that's 7. Are we going to include Lower Decks?
I would, if we're talking about voice acting, yes.
Well, see, he plays Martok in Lower Decks, so we.
Yeah, I'm allowing Martok will count for both there. So.
Right. I can't remember the character he played. There was another character he played in Lower Decks, but that's 8. I'm gonna go with 8.
9, Jerry.
Fuck! What did I miss?
9. You've actually missed him in this episode. He was the Vulcan captain.
No, you said that at the very start.
Say that? Oh, then in that case, you're right. No, you got them all then. Yeah. Sorry, I misheard.
Well, but the thing is, you said 9. I said 8. You said 9. So
no. I think you're correct. So yeah, there is one that is technically the number 9, but I'm not counting it because it's just a cameo, so I'm not counting it. So you had.
What is it? No. What is it?
He's one of the Holosuite guests in the final scene of What You Leave Behind, when there's a whole lot of people in the Holosuite. A few people just kind of appear out without the kind of prosthetics on them. So Mark Alamo is there, and Jeffrey Combs and and JG Hurstler are all there in like suits and tuxes. They're all there in the background. You wouldn't notice them. They're like a blink and a miss type of thing. But said because it's the final scene they actually shot, so they had everyone in that kind of pot in that group.
Oh,
Just
I have to watch that scene just to see it.
it's very good because
I never
it's
knew
almost like
that.
Where's Wally? You can see them all around potted around the scene, like. But
Okay.
but yeah, we'll go through them. So as you said, we have the Vulcan captain, who was hilarious enough. He's actually billed as John Noah Hertzler on the script, which I think is hilarious. Then obviously we have Martok, we have Lass, which was the changeling you were talking about.
Yeah.
Then we have Roy Ritterhouse, which was the illustrator of the science fiction journal From Far Beyond the Stars. He was a Herodian fighter in Tsukatse. He was Kolos and the Klingon captain in both the episodes Judgment and Borderlands from Enterprise. He was the Drukmani captain of Lower Decks. He appeared in 2 episodes of that. And then, of course, he was the voice of Martok in The Least Dangerous Game, which was the most recent season of Lower Decks. But, of course, we counted that as the 2 for Martok. So, yes, in the end, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, technically 9 if you count the Holosuite guest, but we're not here. So it is the full 8. Jerry Soule, you got it right. Congratulations. Look at that. Look at him flexing there. And then it's just a small matter of getting to the scores of this episode. So strap yourselves in then for the final act, lads. So, right then. So let's get on with the scoring, and we start off as ever with the plot. So, much like the case when we were talking about the plot of the episode, we're thinking of how intriguing this is meant to be. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first actual pilot, if you will, the first debut of a series we've done so far on this show. So I think the plot is almost like kind of doubly important here because it's also serving as a hook to get you invested into the rest of the season, the rest of the series. And I think in that sense, it's a doubly important job. Because one thing to actually kind of keep your attention for an hour, but this is the show. Go and please watch us. There's something going on here. So I'm almost kind of including the characters and how they're introduced and expanded in this first episode as well. Overall, I have very little negatives to say about the plot because I think it goes at a breakneck pace. It covers a lot of ground in an hour and 30 minutes. Like, if they wanted to, they could have done this in 3 parts, to be honest, because there's a lot of ground to cover. I think they covered it fairly well, if maybe a few skips in between, just because they just didn't have enough time almost. Like, they were telling too big a story for the first 2 episodes. Which is not a critique, by the way. It's just the nature of the show, I guess. Overall, I was very, very happy with the plot. Certainly enough to get me to start watching the show.
Yeah. I agree with you there. The plot itself, it did go at breakneck speed, and they did absolutely try and put too much into something that, it's like looking at, say, Lord of the Rings, the 3 Lord of the Rings movies. There was so much more they could have put in, but they didn't because they just didn't have enough time. With this, they tried to put so much into a short amount of time that another episode probably could have done it. They could have added, gone a little bit slower with it and whatnot. But I think the reason they did it is they needed that hook. They needed to send it out into the water and see who nibbled. And I absolutely nibbled because for me, I loved this. It was one of my favorite pilot episodes of any Star Trek show. It's fantastic, fantastically done, fantastically acted. You get introduced to a space station that we've never seen before, to races that we only barely know, and clearly we're going to get to know more of. Characters that are so unbelievably good that like from that episode you just don't know how good they're going to be. Obviously we've been given a single character from another show to kind of start us off. Okay, we kind of know this guy. Where's it going to go from here? And to me, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It gets you hooked in. We want to see more Cardassians. We want to see more about the wormhole. We want to see what's on the other side of that wormhole.
Yes.
We want to see more of this absolutely take no prisoners commander, because he's not a captain. It's the first time in Star Trek that the main character was not a captain. Everyone seems to think that the first time we saw a main character that wasn't a captain was Discovery. No. it was Commander Sisko, not Captain Sisko. It was something that this type of situation you would think it's very important, it's high profile, it's going to have a lot of things going on, a lot of political situations. You're thinking to yourself, it's got to have a captain, and it doesn't have a captain. It has a commander. So, it's kind of like it shows you that grittiness, that darkness, that dirtiness, I suppose, of what this show is ultimately starting off as, and then what it becomes. So, in terms of score, I'm not going to give it a 10, but I'd like to give between 8 and a 9.
I was gonna push to a 9.
Let's go with 9.
Because,
Let's go with 9. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it with the grounded covers in that an hour and 37, it doesn't feel that long to that extent. Like I said, I was saying, like, because the pace of the episode is quite intense, and I think that's also a sign that everything's kind of clicking together. There's not much dead space, especially in a pilot episode. You just do not have the time to let things settle. You need to keep shit going, moving and moving and moving. And I think, especially if I'm trying to compare to, say, a lot of the other pilots from the Star Trek, the Next Generation had a lot of that kind of breathing room where now come here, like, they had 25 episodes, they got plenty of time to flesh stuff out, but the fact that, like, they didn't want to overwhelm me with a lot of stuff, and I think that kind of is why it had such a tepid start to begin with, because it was still working off the fact that it was like, this is an odyssey, this is space, this is all grandiose and fabulous and stuff like that. Whereas, as you said, Jerry, this is a more intense, gritty punch into the season.
Yeah.
And this is very key because DS9 did this very, very well and had a fantastic pilot. But then Voyager did the exact same strategy with their first episode and was fucking fantastic. It's still one of the better episodes of Voyager, hilariously enough, which probably says a lot more about Voyager, but that's the separate issue. But every first season episode of Star Trek from that point on, like, if you compare them all, like, for Encounter Farpoint is by far the worst, because it kind of took that it kind of didn't take the advantage when it was there. And yeah, I think that's kind of it set a pace in that sense. So yeah, 9 I think is a fair shout. Next up then is setting. So I think I'll leave this to you, Jerry, because I think you'd love to gush about DS9 and how fabulous it looks, both destroyed and undestroyed.
Well, the first thing we see of Deep Space Nine in this episode is obviously it's orbiting Bajor. So you see Bajor in the background. You see the beautiful, absolutely exceptionally beautiful starship that is the Enterprise, docked at Upper Pylon 1, 2, or 3. I don't know which. And then, as soon as you go inside, you see this is a station that has been utterly bollocksed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Kardashians left it in a fucking mess. Clearly something to do with Kim's ex or something. I don't know.
We may never know. He fucks up a lot of things, in fairness.
Yeah, him and his Yeezys or Yeezys or whatever the bleeding hell things are called. The place was left in shambles, and even though it's in shambles, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
because it's beautiful. You then see a little bit of Quark's bar. We see ops. We see some of the corridors. We see some of the quarters. You then see the promenade nice and clean and fixed up. You see Quark's bar nice, clean and fixed up. It's such a good start. I don't think there was any first episode of any Star Trek show that showed you so much of this of what you're going to see. You saw all the promenade. You saw the promenade. You saw Odo's office. You saw Sisko's office. You saw the ops. You saw transporters. You saw cargo bays. You saw corridors. You saw different shops on the promenade. You saw it all. And then, of course, you saw a little tiny bit of inside a Kardashian ship. You saw the interior of a runabout for the first time. You saw the runabouts for the first time. You saw Bajor for the first time. You saw what Bajor is like, and some of it is in pieces. You saw inside one of the what are we calling it, a temple, or wherever the Vedics are.
I call it a temple.
Call it a temple. You saw the inside of that. This was absolutely fantastic. What I've thought about is that they obviously wanted to try and put as much money into this first episode as possible to try and, I like that, to get you hooked. Subsequently, from there, I think the budget dipped a bit because certain things happened. They tend to
It balances out over the season. Yeah.
exactly. But what tends to happen with these shows is that they tend to repeat themselves. So that
Mm.
shot of those three Galore class happens 4 or 5 times in the show,
Yeah, it does.
and it happens, uh, from the first season all the way nearly to the last season, and you see them again, the same fucking
Mm.
images, and like, what cheap fuckers here. But absolutely stunning, stunning settings. I'm going 9 on this.
Yeah, like I was thinking 9 myself, because I look at I'm also even considering the location set and location shots as well, where to kind of disorient you with like kind of like just like a bright, just a sunny, sudden vista of something where like again Cisco is being kind of like torn like kind of like side by side to like where he was on a spaceship, now he's on this, now he's on that. So what better way to jar between say space and like kind of like rocky fucking passages and so forth than to suddenly be on a beach with your dead wife. It's like fucking okay. And like I said, the actual bloom of it as well. It's like it is completely different. You would not have seen this in your first episode of any Star Trek so far. So it is setting itself out differently. And again, perhaps a bit of a flex the fact that they do have that bit of budget to do stuff like this. And obviously the rest of the first season kind of contained it to more or less 3 rooms at that stage. Well, at least they did the blowout in the first episode. But even on that point about setting is the fact that like obviously didn't show you everything in DS9, but it gave you the guided tour almost. It gave you the kind of the crash course, like where most of the things you're going to see over the next couple of episodes. But it also was trying to reinforce the fact that clearly things don't necessarily have to be done right now, completed right now, which is why everything is nice and smoky. It's lit differently. There's rubble all over the floor because you can focus then on the ground. You don't have to see the overarching, like say, the promenade as such, because the promenade is not completed. In a kind of way, there is a kind of like a logic to it. So by the end of the episode, we actually see when it's all cleaned up and it looks the way it should almost. Then you can actually see that, well, this is the actual progression we come from. So I think they've done that very very well, and yeah, I think 9 is a fair estimate in that sense. Next then is the writing. So again, I've very little things to say in regards to the writing. I think Kira was perhaps a bit one-dimensional towards the start of the episode, where again I think that was kind of a hangover from being the stand-in for Ro Laren, and I think as the episode kind of went on, I think she actually, like as a Nana visitor, got more comfortable in the role and played it in a more balanced, sensible way, as opposed to just being, you're all shit, I hate the Federation, fucking up the Bajorans, whatever the fuck, it kind of went from that to be a bit more temperate, and then obviously sequence developments will happen after this episode that kind of tempers Kira a little bit more. So I think in that way they kind of got the writing a little bit off. Bashir is a little bit too much of a fucking golden retriever in this episode. He's just happy go lucky fucking, I'm happy to just help, type of stuff. So that there's a few little kind of negative things in that. But what I did like was they set the stall out for most of the characters.
Yeah.
You got a very good sense of Jadzia. Just needed one scene about Jadzia and we sorted. We just needed one line about Odo, one line about Quark, one line about them, and it just sets everyone up nicely for the start of the season. And obviously basically just kind of spin the board and see which plot do you advance next. Yeah. And I think that was good, because especially as you mentioned, because they had so much to get through in this one episode, to find a spot in the script to get that ball rolling, I think is a very good thing to do. So I wanted to give good points for that. So I'm kind of swaying to an 8 or a 9 on the writing.
Okay.
Probably more to 8 than anything else.
I'll go with an 8 because even though I think the writing was good, there was just far too much. And they tried to include far too much in it. Now, I understand that they wanted to kind of flesh out the characters even just the tiniest little bit. So you got the bit about Quark, you got the bit about Jadzia. I think for me, what was most telling about the episode was that one line that Odo said, which was, I was found in the Denorius Belt. I don't know where I came from. You instantly know, well, he's definitely from the Gamma Quadrant. You know he's from the Gamma Quadrant. That's it. So we're going to find his race in the Gamma Quadrant. Of course, what does that lead on to? Instantly, like, that's the Dominion. course, we don't know that now, but it's stuff like that. I like that. So I
They
would
left themselves a thread to pull on. That's
exactly,
what I
yeah.
was saying. Yeah.
Let's pull on this and let's see. Oh,
Mm.
it's getting here we go. So I think, yeah, I agree with 8 there. I think there was a bit too. They did try to put too much in. Absolutely, I don't think there's any denying that. But I think the stuff that they did put in was fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Next up then is the acting. So, Jerry, I'll happily defer to your experience here. How do you feel the acting was in this episode?
I don't necessarily think, in terms of the main characters, I don't think there was any bad acting. I think if you're going to look at any bad acting, it would have been that Vedic that he met on the promenade. You need to come as like that terrible, terrible, terrible acting. I think everyone else played a blinder. I think particularly 2 people. I think, which would be obviously Sisko and Jake as well, because Jake had to the actor's name now escapes me.
Sir Rock Lofton.
Eric Lofton. He had to go from playing a child, which essentially he was in it, to playing a being who didn't know anything about humans.
Yeah.
And I thought it was seamless. He was fantastic in it. But all you have to do in terms of acting is look at Sisko's performance. Everything from the very first scene where he loses his wife to the anger he has towards Picard, to then the flashbacks, constant flashbacks with the prophets, seeing his wife die and how he dealt with that there. Oh, it was a masterclass when it comes to acting from Avery Brooks. Absolutely masterclass. As I said, there was the one couple of letdowns. The others were good. You can't say they weren't. But they weren't exceptional. They weren't brilliant. It was just basically us being introduced to these characters for the first time. I couldn't go a 10. As good as Avery Brooks was, I couldn't go a 10. I'd have to go 8 to a 9 again.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat, because I think for Avery Brooks on himself, like just for the sheer amount of range he had, it would have been a 10. But I think it takes 2 to tango in that sense, and obviously there's a few people that just weren't comfortable in the role yet, and that happens though. Like this is a pilot. This is the first episode. I don't think you're gonna get Shakespearean performances right at the bat, especially not on Star Trek.
No,
because Jesus, like if you're doing a counter Farpoint, I think the acting could be like fucking 3 or 4 there, because everyone was off kilter. But because again, this is uncharted territory, Picard was playing a character that like Gene Roddenberry kind of picture for someone else, and then he ended up getting fucking Macbeth, if you know what I mean. So it was a case where like, oh, you just go do what you want. Like his focus was on Riker and Wesley, and that's where the energy was going to in the scripts, because he wanted to kind of do, I think he wanted to do a little bit what he did with Decker in the motion picture. If the shit wasn't working with Kirk, he'd have him as his backup and kind of flipped it there. Whereas for Wesley, that was just his fucking like putting a lot of himself into that character, let's say. But that's a separate issue. At least in this one, I think a lot of it is just down to the fact that these characters have not found their feet yet, and that's going to show in the first episode, where they can only really work on one personality trait and lean on that. So like Bashir is clearly just a man-child in this wonderful year of fucking 2246, whatever it is, and Jadzia has her trait, and Kira is aggro, and Odo is...
Hold on, you just plucked that year out of nowhere. And it's about 120 years off.
Oh, it totally is off.
It's
like,
it's the 2360s, you mad.
2360s, that's what it was. Yeah. Sorry, I'm still thinking of other man children in Star Trek, like Ensign Merryweather and Reed and so forth. Pew pew pew. He loves shooting things. He's a total man child. Pew 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 pew. But no. I think I'll actually give it an 8.5, because
we'll go in the middle. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because like I said, I think for Sisko alone, because he was the focal point of the episode in the end, so I think it made sense that he gets a bit of credit here in this one, whereas everyone is still kind of supporting role at the moment, and then obviously that'll change in the next few episodes. But yeah. Next up then is action, and for this one, hot start, hot finish, and creamy middle. I think fair to say.
Absolutely, yeah. You get something that we have never seen. Because all we got was from Best of Both Worlds, because obviously we watched Best of Both Worlds on the channel. You got the action between the Enterprise and the Borg cube, but you never saw the Battle of World 359. You saw the aftermath, and that's all you saw. This time, we actually got to see the fight between the Federation and there's Chewie behind me here. Between the Federation and the Borg cube,
Yes.
you got to see exactly what happened to all those dozens of ships and tens of thousands of people that died. And it's a thing where it starts off with a bang, an absolute bang. You see ships getting blown to bits. You see the Saratoga getting caught in a tractor beam, and the shields are down, and it's slowly being ripped apart by the Borg cube. You see other ships flying past and going immediately. Then it obviously slows down because we then need to get into the story, but then it picks right back up with the Cardassians decide we're going to attack the station. You just left it, now you're coming back to attack it.
Yeah,
absolute brilliant, action-packed. It didn't have to be action from start to finish. Those bits of action that we got were exceptionally good, and because of the action at the start, because it was something that we'd only heard about before, we had never seen, I'm going to go as far as I'm going to give this a 10.
Yeah,
because we had never seen it before. It had never been seen. We'd only heard about it, and we were like, all you see is the graveyard of ships in Wolf 359. It was like, how did this happen? It was 40 ships here. How did they destroy 30 or 40 ships here? How did they destroy 30 or 40 ships? You actually see what happens. The Borg cube were completely relentless. There was no stopping them. It didn't matter what the Federation sent after them. It was absolutely unstoppable, and they just went through that fleet like a knife through butter. And you saw every single part of it. You saw Ambassador classes destroyed. You saw Nebula classes destroyed. You saw Excelsiors, Mirandas, Oberts. Didn't matter. They were all swept aside by the Borg cube, and it was absolutely visually stunning. Absolutely. For me, it's a 10. I don't know if you agree. We can meet somewhere. What are your thoughts?
I was actually, funny enough, going to give it a 9, for the kind of exact same reasons. Because when I look at the 9, I think because it kind of steadied itself in the middle, it kind of got I wouldn't say it got pedestrian. Pedestrian is the wrong word to use, but it was the trough to the peak, and it was like peak, trough, peak. I think it's a sign of a decent two-parter, because you can't go all action all the time. You'll just tire the audience out. Unless that's the type of episode you're doing where people are in the mood for that, when they're in the mode for it. I think you could have done that, but there was other stories being told here rather than just Sisko's tragic backstory. You couldn't just go from there. But that being said, because of the pacing of the episodes, it doesn't feel like much of a lull, if you know what I mean. Because, like I said, you're still reading from Wolf 359, and they have the wormhole shit kicking off. But then also little small bits in between that break up the tedium. Where, like, say you have the robber trying to steal stuff, you've got the little kind of incidents in between, and now then you have to have the interactions with the prophets. That like stuff like that feel very dynamic. You know, because like I said, the episode is flowing, it's moving still, which again I would count as action personally, especially if you're in an episode where you're not actively doing anything, if you know what I mean. You're not fighting anybody. So I would have given this a 9. So we can meet in the middle with a 9.5.
We'll go 9.5 then. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, 9.5 it is. Next one then is effects, and I'm gonna put my cards on the table here. I think this is probably the best part of this show, to be honest. Just completely blown away with the jump in quality here. Now, we are caveating here that this is we were watching, and indeed everyone's watching the original version of Deep Space Nine, because we're a bit spoiled looking at the kind of the HD, the Blu-ray, if you will, of the Next Generation, and how well that looks. We kind of forget that wasn't the original. This is how it looked for Deep Space Nine and how it stays. So yes, you're going to forgive the little bit of fading on the blue screening. You're going to understand that like the ship models are going to look a bit blurry in places and so forth. Yeah, that's understandable, because we're also starting to use a little bit of computer generated stuff as well, especially for some of the fast shots that they're using. But there's still models being used, so it's a good mix. I just think everything about it, like the wormhole effect was fantastic. We kind of mentioned that it kind of like that kind of underwater feel to it. The transitions for the prophets, again, very disorienting, very intentional. The way the Saratoga looks when it's getting torn to shreds. I did take a point off for the use of rocks, but that's that's only standard really. But yeah, look, there's a lot to like about this episode in terms of the effects because I think it was trying to make itself visually different from the next generation, and I think it did that. It's at that cusp. It's at that point where the next generation kind of had its suite of like what you'd expect for designs, what you'd expect for episode types, let's say. So when the DS9 goes, okay, how do we fit into this profile? Here's the type of episode we can play out, and here's the type of things that we can do.
Yeah.
And especially with the transitions, especially with what it was doing with the wormhole effects, and just using a little bit more CGI, little bit of computer, a little bit of technology, and just trying to blend it in together. I think it worked very, very well. So I'm going to score this high, truth be told. Possibly a 9, possibly a 10. What would you say, Jerry?
You have to look at it. They obviously wanted to get a different feel to Next Generation. The Next Generation was all bubbly and light and clean. When you look at the Enterprise, it's absolutely immaculate from outside and in. It's clean, it's bright, it's colored. You look at a starbase. Look at a typical starbase. Big, kind of silvery, white, blue, nice, cool colors. It just looked, and again, shiny and new.
Yeah.
And then you get this mining outpost. So when you think of mining, you think of dirt, you think of coal, you think of blackness, you think of all stuff like grimy stuff. It's exactly what the station looks like, and it's exactly what they were going for, and they hit the nail on the head. Yes. When it comes to everything else in terms of the look and the graphics and things like that, I think the Kardashian ships were fantastic. I think the wormhole was fantastic. I think there was one thing that let them down was the phasers of the Cardassian ships, because the phasers of normal Federation ships look bigger and bulkier, and these are supposed to be the main phaser array of a Galore class is supposed to be the equivalent of a main phaser array of a Galaxy class, and it just didn't. It looked like a mining laser.
Yeah,
we've seen mining lasers, so I will have to take marks off for that. I think because it's the very first episode, everything we saw was new. There was nothing. Yeah. There was nothing recycled. There was nothing that we have seen before. The Enterprise being a Deep Space Nine, brand new. The Battle of Wolf 359, brand new. Nothing we hadn't seen before. So I like that fact. But I do have to take off because I think there was a couple of little things they could have made better. So I'm gonna go 9.
We'll leave it at 9. So leave it at 9 for effects. Next up then is score, which I do believe is one of your favorite categories, Jerry. So how would you rate the music in this episode?
The score, it is one of my favorite categories. But I have to say, apart from the opening sequence with Wolf 359 on the Borg, it didn't really, I don't know, it didn't hit me. It didn't go, Jesus, this was really, really good. It wasn't, it didn't, there was some good bits in it. But it seemed a lot of it was would have been taken from Next Generation episodes.
Yeah.
The music at the start is very ominous, and it grips you. Like the music grips you as much as the script.
Immediately start the episode.
Yeah. It grips you just as much as the script about Wolf 359. So that was exceptionally good. But for the rest of the episode, it didn't hit me. It didn't go, oh Jesus, that was great. It was just okay. So this would be the one category I think that lets the episode down.
Yeah.
I think for me, in later episodes of Deep Space Nine, probably has some of the best music in all of Star Trek.
Exactly. When the scene demands it, I think it's there.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, like I think there was different priorities on this episode. I think.
Yeah. I think if you look at two very specific episodes of Deep Space Nine for music, and it's exceptionally good. You look at The Way of the Warrior, and the music played in The Warrior is fantastic. It brings that anxiety that you get. You get, lads, fucking Klingons. We're getting attacked by the Klingons.
But it's the Klingon motifs as well. It's the steel drums. It's all that sort of jazz. Yeah.
But then, and I believe the writers of Star Trek and the writers of Deep Space Nine, they missed the trick by not keeping this music is that when it comes to the episode Call to Arms
Yes.
and the attack of the Dominion fleet against the station, they had this music that the only thing I can match it to is Star Wars and the Imperial March.
Yeah.
That music from that episode of Call to Arms was the Imperial March of the Dominion. That's what it was. And the fact that they never used it again, I was so upset. I was like, you could have used that every single time you saw Ducat, every single time you saw the Dominion. That should have been the Dominion's own music. The same way as that we have a specific, like that what you're saying about the Klingons, the drums and the subtle little things that that Klingons are around. They should have used that for the Dominion. I believe they missed a trick. So in terms of the score for this episode, it did get let down because it was very much a recycled Next Generation background music that we got. I have to go middle of the road here. I'm going to go 5.
Yeah, I'll match with you 5 because I think as you said, the bombastic seat opening just doesn't stretch out for 90 minutes.
It's not enough for an hour and a half, 90 minutes. It doesn't do enough in those first 30 seconds to grip you in terms of music. It is good music because it's Deep Space Nine music, but it just wasn't enough on this occasion.
Yeah, exactly. I think a little bit of emotional punch in certain scenes would have gone astray. In fairness, and I think that's exactly your point, Jerry. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Next up then is scenes, and again, this is on scenes we liked, ones that we think were iconic, and ones that we think just kind of clicked, and obviously ones that we think we didn't. I don't think there's any wasted scenes totally in this episode. I think every scene kind of made sense. Either it was down to the central plot, to the A story, B story, C or whatever it is, or a character relevant scene.
Yeah.
It had to introduce again, this pilot was very important. It had to introduce all the main characters. It had to get them out in the open. So you had to get the Siskos, you had to get the Ferengi, you had to get Odo, Dax, and Kira and Bashir. Get them all in. Get the chief in, all this sort of stuff. So there's a few scenes I particularly liked. The three I can remember off the top of my head would be obviously the opening scene is bombastic. It's fabulous the way it's done. You could have spent a half an hour on an origin story for Benjamin Sisko, or you could have just had that 2-minute shootout, and that spoke volumes. You didn't need to see any more. Then you have the two scenes really between him and Picard are fantastic acting, absolutely brilliant acting between the two of them. You only see them in the same room, I think, twice in the entire run of DS9, and somehow if they had kind of crossover, you'd love to see what the dynamic is. But their energy is fantastic. The hostility from Sisko and the defensiveness from Picard, because again, timeline wise, he's only a couple of years removed from it, so he's still very touchy about it. It's a very much a don't poke the fucking bear type of question. And yeah, I think the two of them played it off really, really well. Another one I actually quite liked, which is quite understated now, is the Irish goodbye from O'Brien, because something like that speaks more to his volume, and it is a very Irish thing to do. It's just right, no one's looking, I better head off type of shit, And again, much to your point, as you're saying it there, you could adequately tell that Picard appreciates O'Brien for not just manning the transporter room, but for actively kind of being part of the crew, for unofficially part of the bridge crew almost, because he's like your first person you call if there's something wrong, kind of way. And then clearly the other episodes where O'Brien features in the run of the Next Generation that come into play. So I think those scenes are actually quite nice. And again, a few little character moments like Dax with Symbiote and Odo getting his little piece in as well. So I think there's a few decent scenes there. So I don't think there's any bad ones thrown in.
No, I don't.
Solid enough around the ground.
I don't think there was any bad ones. And you basically, I had 3, you had 3, and you chose 2 of my 3. So the Irish goodbye was going to be one of them. I think it's a lovely sentimental scene. It's a thing where it is a goodbye from O'Brien to Picard, or Picard to O'Brien. It's a thing where it was very, very subtly done. It's nice.
Yes.
It's Picard actually beaming him off rather than just the chief beaming him off, and that's lovely. The scene between Picard and Sisko, it goes from Picard thinking, oh, we're all hunky-dory, oh, new assignment, to I killed your wife, oh shit, and we go from there, and there's so many different emotions in the scene. It's fantastic. And the last one for me has to be when he breaks down when he's with the prophets and he's on the Saratoga.
Yes.
That to me that's peak Avery Brooks, and it was just so good, so good. I'm gonna have to go 8 to 9 on this one.
I'm willing to give it an 8.
Okay.
Actually, no. Do you know what? I'm actually bumping up to 9 because you remind me of that sequence with the prophets where they're trying to understand a couple of things, and like I said, on that question of wasted movement, like you like it doesn't come across how kind of like life and death that situation is, because if that doesn't go right for Sisko, then they lose a wormhole, they lose ships, they're stranded in the Gamma Quadrant for God knows how long. Like you're getting a secondary fucking Voyager situation there.
Yeah.
You know, actually, you might even argue like Voyager is almost like the what if of what happens if you do get stranded on the opposite side. If that does fail, so I think a lot of that stuff is missing. And again, it's that scene in particular is the tie up to the start of the episode. It brings you back to full circle to where the grief and sorrow comes from, and kind of explains why the character is so ratty at the start. With Picard and with other people. So yeah, I think a 9 is a fair assessment.
Yeah.
And on that point, we move on to the character category. So again, we're judging these characters on their first outing, essentially. So obviously we see very little of Jake. We see very little of the Ferengi, apart from Quark. We don't see Nog or Rom that much. In fact, Rom wasn't even given a name at this stage. He was just like another Ferengi. Which you can tell because Max didn't have his really silly voice on. He was just talking like a normal Ferengi would. So he wasn't doing that yet. Sorry. So those guys. So you had all that going around. So and again, a few kind of characters were just getting introduced essentially. So Kira got a lot of love. Odo obviously being introduced as the shapeshifter, that was obviously going to intrigue audiences. But then you also added in that kind of that part about the Denable belt, that was always going to come into play as well. And then you had like stuff where I think like what wasn't really going to work out with like Bashir, like, you know, immediately like asking to see fucking Dax essentially. I mean, first days of the job, asking your co-member for a shift is probably not going to work, Bashir, to be honest. But however, and then the stuff with O'Brien, then like obviously, like not even in the fucking job 2 days and they're already stressed the fuck out. Like, I mean, that is the tale of O'Brien right there, isn't it? Like fucking hell. So I think it was like in that sense, some of the characters landed in this first episode, some of them didn't, which I think is natural. I felt Kira was a little bit too strong a flavor in this first episode until perhaps the second half, where they kind of ironed out some of the kinks in the writing and in the acting as well, let's be fair. Obviously Sisko was like chief amongst them in that sense, and I actually throw Picard in here as well. I mean, the fact that you like to get Sisko, like to use a wrestling term, over in a sense, you needed Picard to be that obliging foil to be able to say, well, this is where he is coming from as a character. We need the contrast, and there's Picard there in every stretch of the imagination. So I think that worked out very, very well. So in terms of character, a little bit torn. Again, I give a few negatives to some characters, so I'm kind of giving it to about of an 8 at the moment. But I'd like to hear what you think, Jerry.
Obviously, you know, the standout is Avery Brooks. Absolutely fantastic from start to finish. Absolutely brilliant. You've got the little performances from character that we already knew, which was obviously Picard, and he was exceptional as well. But the other one I think would be Chief O'Brien, because we saw what he was like on the Enterprise, but now he's somewhere where he doesn't really know how everything works, and he's used to things actually working, whereas he's only short of saying fucking Jesus, what's this bollocks? He's only short of saying stuff like that because, like, he didn't really know how to do something because it was a Cardassian transporter. He's trying to fix something and the computer's going against him. Like, what the fuck is this? I think his performance was fantastic. Little things like we would like you looked at Ducat and thought, I want to see more of this.
Yeah,
I want to see more of him. The same with you know, the dynamic between Dax and Bashir. You're like, where's that going to go? You're looking at Odo going, okay, he's literally made of stone.
Yeah.
but we find out why. You've got Quark, and everyone's very intrigued by Quark at this point. I thought
Yeah.
the characters, I thought they were fantastic, but the standout, obviously, Avery Brooks, Commander
That's
Sisko.
actually a good point about Quark. There is the fact that like he's actually kind of broken the mold already for what you're expecting as a Ferengi, because the
Yeah,
Ferengi is the was the kind of the pantomime villains going hey,
yeah, and it's
or the
changed.
shysters, you
Like
know.
he did get a little bit of that because he looked at Nog and went,
Yeah,
so they were like, they obviously said to him, you kind of have to bring a little bit of that old style
mold it.
Ferengi
Yeah,
in, but let's change it from there. Kira, would have been the only one that I don't think they did properly, but I think from episode 2, all they had to do was cut her hair,
yeah,
and she was fleshed out that bit more. So uh, an 8.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. And then that leads us then to the final category of consequences. And what I found kind of interesting from this episode was that the actual religious aspect of this episode doesn't actually come into play at all, which I was very
No.
surprised by, because I always had in my head that like the kind of the character 180 for Kira comes into this a good bit, but then of course the actual religious aspect of Cisco being the emissary doesn't actually come into play until later on in the season, when the likes of fucking Kai Gaslight comes in to ruin things. So like for me, it was kind of like a bit of a surprise, thinking like, oh, I'm surprised they didn't pull on that thread. But then again, they probably ran out of time because they had other shit to do.
Yeah.
But consequences wise, Jerry, how would you say what were the biggest kind of like knock-ons of this episode? Would you say
The biggest um the biggest consequence, I suppose, of this episode has to be the wormhole.
Yeah.
It's the fact that without Cisco coming along and going up into the Norius belt and actually discovering the wormhole, we would have never found it. The wormhole would have never been found. We wouldn't have prior warning of a race that wanted to conquer the entire Alpha Quadrant. Which of course we would never have the prophets. And again, that goes hand in hand with, later on in the season, you find out that was actually the prophets were the ones who basically created Cisco, essentially.
Yeah.
But he had to be the one there to discover them. So it's kind of catch-22. It's all over the place. You got the fact that without this episode, you never got the Dominion, which, the Romulans were always the devious ones. The Klingons were always the drunken guy at the end of the night. I'll fight you type of situation. Yeah. The Borg were the kind of standout villains at this point, because you never really considered the Romulans or the Klingons the standout villains. They were villains.
Yeah. They were tempered at that stage.
Exactly.
They were more like rivals than anything else.
Exactly. So I think the one, this is the first time you have the kind of the standout villains of the show, which starts off with the Cardassians and then leads to the Cardassian Dominion alliance, because the Dominions is essentially the biggest threat to the Federation. Not the Borg or not the Klingons, the Romulans, the Zenkethi, or any other bloody race there is. It's the Dominion. So without this, you don't get the Dominion. It's kind of like without Best of Both Worlds, you don't get Deep Space Nine. Without the wormhole, you don't get the Dominion. So that's the far-reaching consequences are that. But yeah, it's just one of those episodes that so many things happen. You look at, okay, we now need to know more about Odo. Clearly, he comes from the Gamma Quadrant. What's his race? Where does he come from? Who is he? You need to know more about the Ferengi, and the Ferengi get so fleshed out in Deep Space Nine compared to the Next Generation that you know more about them than the Klingons at one point. You know 100%. Everything about them, and I think that's fantastic because they're a great set of characters. And then of course you don't get the religious aspect right now, but then it does come in time with the fact that Sisko is the emissary. Is the emissary of the prophets. He's somebody who was created specifically to have the link between the Bajorans and the prophets, and has far-reaching consequences. So, yes, huge consequences, I think, and you don't get any of that without this episode, without this show, without this series. So, it's got to be high. So I'm going to go to 9 on this one.
Yeah, I was actually going to go with 9, and the reason why I wouldn't go for the full 10, I think, is quite a surprising one in a sense, going by the way the episode was framed. And naturally, with how the few episodes of Next Generation is actually with Picard and his involvement. Now he says, and obviously we know from the episodes that he took a big investment in the Bajorans themselves, particularly with bringing on Rolaren and things like that, and it's kind of being very hands on with how the Bajorans were kind of being integrated into the Federation. And then obviously orders change, and Sisko is essentially taking over that role of getting them into priming them for entry into the Federation. And what I find strange is that, like, essentially for someone who was so heavily invested in the Bajorans, as we saw in this episode, you don't see it. You don't see him checking in. You don't see him noticing at that point. And I think that's a bit of a conceit from the fact that, like, the Next Generation were doing their own stuff and DS9 were doing their own thing. But it kind of filled that gap for, like, well, what is Picard doing? Is he just admiring from afar, or is he doing anything like that? We don't really know, and we don't really see any of that.
Well,
Which I think
you only ever get one more incident of the Enterprise and or Picard being near Bajor or Deep Space Nine, and that's in it's a two-parter from Next Generation, and it's when Worf goes to find his father.
Yes, that
Now,
was
for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it.
Birthright.
Birthright. There you go.
Yeah.
So it's a thing where that's the only other occasion you see the Enterprise and Picard there. What I would have liked to see would be another interaction between Sisko and Captain Picard.
It would have been like a couple of years, like a couple of seasons down the line. Like, here's how it's going.
It's at least a season to a season and a half later. So you're looking at that. You go, okay, well, that's a year to a year and a half.
Yeah.
You could have had a scene where Picard kind of checks in with Sisko to see how he's getting on, and you kind of have a more cordial talk like you had at the second talk in this episode. So I would have liked to see that. That would have been great. I think I think that would have been fantastic. But
yeah,
of course, we never got it.
This.
Yeah. I think I would have liked to see, even down the line, even during the Dominion War, to see the Enterprise turn up, the Enterprise E turn up. And some sort of interaction there. You've got Worf there, or we're dropping Worf off. He came on another one of our wacky adventures.
Oh, you should have seen him with the tough little ship. It's like, don't fucking mention the tough little ship.
I would have liked to see something like that. But yeah, no, I think we scored it right. I think we did.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a 9 is a fair result. So, where does that leave this episode, Jerry Soul? I hear you asking. Well, this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting indeed. So, I will start us off in reverse order, as we always do. So, in last place, as it tends to be now at this stage, the Voyager Conspiracy, officially 20th of the list on 59, only a half point ahead of the Arsenal of Freedom with 59.5. Then we have a bit of a jump then to the Enterprise incident at 67. We have two entries at 72 out of 100, which is the Doomsday Machine from the original series and Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy from Voyager. A point ahead are two more episodes, both season 1s for Next Generation, The Battle and Conspiracy, both on 73. Space Seed is at 77 out of 100, and Trials and Tribulations are 2 points ahead of that at 79. In the bottom half is Q Who on 80 from the Next Generation, and then the top 10. So in this order, 10th place is Cupid on 81. Joint 8th indeed is the original series double of Balance of Terror and the Trouble with Tribbles at 81.5. Family is next from the Next Generation at 82. 6th place is the Andorian Incident and the Skin of Evil, so joint 5th if you will, 83 points. In 4th place is Lower Decks' No Small Parts at 83.5, which means in 3rd place is Emissary with 84 points. 84 out of 100. Emissary is now 3rd, little lagging behind a little bit from the Best of Both Worlds at 90.5 and In the Pale Moonlight still in the lead with 91. But Emissary now 3rd of our list of what we think are the best Star Trek episodes. So that was pretty good innings for our double header, Jerry. We have another one in the bronze rank this time.
I think so. I think it was definitely scored fairly. I definitely think I at one point I was like, this could actually be a contender because we were going 8s, 9s, 110 there.
It's consistent enough, yeah.
It was very consistent. I was like, this is going to be a contender. I'm almost saying to myself, this better not be number one because what's no in the Pale Moon Light, I still think is we're 20 episodes in. It's stayed number one since it came onto the list.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be beaten. If there was ever an episode to beat it, I do have in mind what it could be. And it is another Deep Space Nine episode. Funny enough, I don't think there's any episode from any other series that's going to beat it. I really don't. So if there was ever anything that was going to beat it, it's another Deep Space Nine episode, and it's something that we will watch down the line. So we'll wait.
We shall see.
We'll wait and see. But if it does get beaten by this particular episode I'm talking about, I won't be upset because it's one of my favorites. But in the Pale Moonlight right now, still believe it's number one Star Trek episode out there. Prove me wrong, people. Prove me wrong.
Indeed, we will. Well, that's the whole point of the show, Jerry, I suppose. So, and indeed, we will be trying to prove that wrong over from the last 20 episodes to the next 20 episodes, I'm sure, because it is a bit of a milestone doing this 20 times, Jerry. So, here's to the next 20, indeed. So, there you have it. That is our very jumbo episode of the Best of All Worlds in the bag here. So, thank you for sticking with us till the end. I'm sure you've probably done this in stints of 2 or 3, which we greatly appreciate, I'm sure. But myself and Jerry are fit for bed at this stage. But however, thank you all very much for watching this episode. And as ever, by all means, let us know in the comments how you thought of our review. Do you think 84 is a fair score of Emissary? Should it be higher, lower? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And by all means, let us know of suggestions for episodes we should review in future. Again, we have a new arc starting in the next couple of weeks on this show, so we will be looking for suggestions and prompts. If you have some, we'd love to hear from you. As ever, we're open to suggestions. If you think you'd have an episode that can beat In the Pale Moonlight, let us know and we'll review it. Because like I said, we're on a clean slate here. Anything is possible in the next episode.
Exactly.
And indeed, something may be. But for now, by all means, support the channel, Nerds or Us. Do our like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff that you expect for all of us to shill at the end here. And a special mention to Jerry Soul, who is twitching like a mad yoke at the moment. Jerry, give us all the details. What can we expect from you on Twitch at the moment?
I used to appear quite regularly on Cos Challenger's Twitch stream. We had Stephen from Cos Challengers on the channel. I decided I was going to set up my own, so I set up my own. It's called Jerry Souls VIP. So the VIP stands for Virtual Irish Pub, so you can see the lovely pub background that we have there. I stream on Mondays and Thursdays with a random day here and there during the week. I mainly stream Star Wars: The Old Republic, but I have been known to stream Sea of Thieves, which is a fantastic game. So catch me there, please. If you are a Twitch person, we will say, please give us a follow on that. Follow me on my streams. As I say, we stream every Monday and Thursday at 9:30, and then a random day during the week, but I always advertise for us, so it'll be 9:30 as well. So please follow me there. It's www.twitch.tv/Jerry Souls VIP. So please follow me there.
Indeed you will, and look forward to watching some of those streams. But for now, guys, thank you very much for watching the show as ever. And as always, when watching Best of All Worlds, we leave you with this.